Hello and welcome to the Race for and Everything, episode 244. Welcome to this new liberated world of tariffs and economic
Crying
decline.
boomers.
Yes, hell of a lot of people crying on both sides of politics. People crying about how it's going to affect our election. But look, now that I've said that, I'm wishing maybe I should have put the economy section up first. But no, we're going to start with our usual subheading, which is immigration.
People woke up this morning. I think they know what the fuck is going on.
Well, no one knows really. But no, we will get to the economy and the tariffs and what they mean for Australia and all of that soon. What we're going to open today with is Peter Dutton's plan to limit international students. We were told previously that the reason why the coalition voted against Labor's plan to cap student numbers was because they didn't go far enough. Indeed, I have seen one study that said that we actually have taken in for 2025 a record amount of international students. So, yeah, sure. By that measure, Dutton is right. It obviously did not go far enough. But now we have to ask ourselves, well, will the coalition's policy actually make a dent in immigration and actually slow down overall levels of migration and therefore put downward pressure on house prices and rent prices? And yeah, you'd probably guess that Knowlesy and I do not think so. So let's go through a bit of the detail here. So under this student cap, that would mean that there would be a maximum of 240,000 international students permitted to enter the country to take on an Australian course at the beginning of the academic year, which is basically just the beginning of the year. They would also make it so that no more than about 1/4 of students at public universities are enrolled from overseas. And it is worth pointing out that that mandate would not apply to private universities and vocational providers like technical colleges, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Certainly worth pointing out there that they do make a sizable chunk of the higher education sector. I mean, here in WA, that would include Notre Dame, wouldn't it?
It would.
Who would have like a few thousand students enrolled, I'd say, or a few hundred at the very least.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Like,
Notre Dame's classification is so fucking weird.
Right. Now, they are talking about how this is like everyone wants to just go after foreign students because it seems to be one of the easier ones to do. To impose these conditions on the student 500 visa. And it has been pointed out that around half of all temporary migrants to Australia are international students. So this would perhaps make a dent. Now, I pointed out before, though, that current levels of international students, like per classroom or whatever, it's already probably around 1/4, maybe even 30%. I remember the coalition were originally touting figures of 30% to 35%, Now they're going for this figure of 25% plus an overall cap of 240,000 students. That is
That's
still a
still a horrific
shitload.
amount.
That is. I mean, remember, the goal for net migration is to bring net migration to pre pandemic levels, which means uh, around 250,000. So you're actually talking about almost the entire limit of net migration for pre pandemic levels. It's almost there. It almost makes up that entire amount. So 240,000, that's an extremely high amount. Um, so public universities would be able to enroll no more than 115,000 international students a year, while private and non-university higher education facilities will be able to enroll up to, oh god, 125,000.
Dear
The
fucking
total
lord.
cap, so here it is, the total cap is 30,000 less than the figure Labor proposed when it tried to pass legislation that would grant the education minister the power to limit student numbers during the last term of Parliament.
Actually, I've got a quick question because I'm not finding it in the prep. Is that per semester or is that per annum?
Per annum.
Per annum, okay. I was going to say, because, like, if it was per semester, that can just be doubled. You could have, like, literally some Indian student, like, enroll in whatever university, quote unquote, do a semester, really not do a semester, and just fuck off and literally rely on the government's deportation system to take care of it. Which,
Right.
again, we know never fucking happens.
Yeah. Okay. So look, about 315,000 international students enrolled in the last academic year. So, of course, what's that? A difference of 75,000 students altogether.
Yep.
However, why is it? I mean, every time either Labor or the coalition do promise some kind of reduction, we don't get it anyway. So let's say Peter Dutton is elected, and he says he's going to make good on this promise. Would we actually get a cut of 75,000 students? I doubt it. I think that whatever amount would be reduced would simply be offset by an increase in other temporary visas. Because remember
Look,
this, Dutton walked back his promise or his indication that he was going to cut net migration, and then he said he had no plans of doing so. So, all right, you might tinker around with how many visas people are allowed to get, but does that actually mean a reduction in net migration overall? Why won't he give figures about that? He won't, and neither will Labor.
God, it's literally this in current elections, like, oh yes, we're going to minorly increase the minimum wage. It's like, okay, well, that's going to affect some people, but again, the amount that they're increasing it has basically been consumed within this year, within the first 4 months of this year. So it's not functionally an increase. I mean, it's not a decrease, which is good, but it's terrifying that we're fighting for that. And then you have Dutton obviously coming out with his figures of a 25% for 3 years. It's just like that's literally 100% reduction in migration wouldn't be enough.
No, it would be a drop in the ocean. And that's despite the fact that the big education lobby in Australia, which is really just the universities, they're the ones who make up that lobby. They have criticised this move, as you would expect, and they said that it is straight out of Donald Trump's playbook. Uh, People really seem to want to tie Peter Dutton to Donald Trump because it seems like, at least internationally, Trump's popularity has taken a nosedive since the tariffs took effect. Um, but anyway, they are talking about a potential $4 billion loss to this particular sector of the economy. And I remember last time I read figures on just how big the international student trade was. It was around $40 billion. Reading this article from the Australian, it's actually estimated to now be $52 billion. So
Jesus.
there you go. That's not the education sector or even the tertiary education sector. That's simply the foreign student market. That alone is worth $52 billion. So uh, they may be affected somewhat, and yeah, who knows? Maybe they will lose around $4 billion. It'll be nothing compared to what they lost during COVID. But also, how much have they raked in um, in the post-COVID world, where we had to have migration adjustments, as we called them, to make up for the lull in migration that we had over those 2 years or so during COVID restrictions. Big education cleaned up over that. So I certainly shed no tears for them. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, this will make very little difference. Um, and it's funny how, like, remember there was that study that came out saying that foreign students don't contribute to rent increases.
Oh
Uh,
God.
Last week we went over that study. I can't remember now, but uh, so Peter Dutton reckons that their own economic modelling shows that that isn't true. So I mean, that at least is something. Um, when someone wants to argue with you and tell you that uh, international student migration has no bearing on the cost of living, I just don't see how that would be. You know, all you've got is
Well,
a
the thing is,
study
and
coming from
yeah, when
universities
they're
in
asked to
Australia
explain it,
by the property council.
they're like, oh yeah, they only buy like budget, blah blah blah, and they stick to standard pricing, and it's just like, yeah, but standard pricing is dictated by their purchasing power, which the more purchasing is going on in the market, the less power it fucking has.
Right,
Oh
right.
God.
So yeah, look, this is it. In terms of the coalition's immigration policy, uh, you know, because of the fact that they make up such a big sector of the temporary migration market, uh, students are sort of seen to be an easy target if you do want to tinker with migration levels. Otherwise Labor wouldn't have chosen that as well. Um, and besides just talking about the usual stuff about being tough with border protection and stopping uh, boat people and asylum seekers, uh, the the coalition is not going to announce any further immigration restrictions. In fact, they're going to be opening things up more. For example, they're bringing back the agriculture visa. We remember that visa under ScoMo.
Ah, yes.
This was the
The
one that
brown
brought in,
slaves visa.
yes. So it brought in people from Pacific Island nations such as Fiji to come and work in rural communities and do things like fruit picking. And was at the behest of the big agricultural uh, lobby in Australia. Very, very little to do with the independently owned farms that we have in Australia, although
Mm.
some of them do benefit from, like, backpacker labor and so forth. But it was really, really just at the behest of big agriculture, who are the main contributors to the coffers of the National Party. And, the National Party sold out a long time ago to big agro, um, which is why you find like so many people from the National Party split off and become independent. And that's been happening for a long time now. I mean, just think of Bob Catter. So,
Mm. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and another example would be Peter Dutton has been talking a lot about bringing in people to deal with the shortage of particular skills when it comes to the construction of homes. So, like, one of the reasons for the housing crisis is, well, we're just not able to build those houses fast enough. So what do? We bring in skilled migrants who are able to do that.
That is
to
like
say,
a 5-year-old wrote a pyramid scheme. Like literally, our country is based on a retarded 5-year-old's idea of a pyramid scheme.
there's never any talk about actually training people,
No.
particularly through like TAFE and vocational colleges. In fact, Labor is better on that stuff than the coalition. Giving free TAFE courses, uh, which teach people skills that are in high demand. At least Labor is doing something like that. Uh, the coalition says no. Let's just import them from the Pacific. Okay. Anyway, moving off that topic, um, and talking about the High Court's controversial ruling that indefinite detention in Australia is unlawful. So we might remember that, two drug dealers, actually, one from Poland, one from Vietnam, actually took their status to court. I think initially it went to the federal court, but then the government actually elevated it to the High Court. I guess because they wanted to get it over and done with. So once you elevate to the High Court, there's no further court of appeal. Um, and this was about them being resettled in where was it? Was it Papua New Guinea? No, Nauru. Nauru.
Oh, imagine
Uh,
resettling a Polish dude in fucking Nauru.
well, it looks like that's what's going to happen
I
because
need I need a color swab on the Polish dude, man. I'm not gonna lie.
so look, indefinite detention, while it is unlawful and unconstitutional, that doesn't mean that it isn't lawful to hold foreigners in detention while their visa applications are pending. So doesn't matter. I think the government was pretty confident in that win. That's why they elevated it to the High Court when this challenge was made.
Yep.
So small little victory there. We're only talking about two people, although that would have still made a precedent and affected other cases too. Okay, so just two stories to finish off immigration. One is, well, um, you know, I shy away from ever saying that I'm glad that someone's dead, but if people remember Petra Georgiou, he was actually the member for Kooyong before Josh Frydenberg took over, and he was basically known as like this eternal thorn in the side of the Howard government for being pro-migration and pro-asylum seeker. He was against offshore processing. He basically saw uh, offshore detention centres as concentration camps. And he was that one guy in
Because
the
he's a
Liberal
bitch.
Party who lefties didn't mind. They'd say like, oh, the Liberal Party wouldn't be so bad if they were all like Petra Georgiou. Anyway, he's dead. He died at the age of 77. And yeah, the
Oh no,
ABC,
looks like his bleeding heart finally gave out.
well, it says that his family described him as an inspirational figure, while Liberal colleagues Josh Frydenberg and Victorian opposition leader Brad Batten have praised him for his integrity. Oh my God. And they make the point that he was a migrant from Greece. He didn't really look very Greek, though. I don't think.
It
Petra
depends what
Georgiou.
kind of Greek migrant.
I guess so. Well, I mean, what I basically mean is he didn't look like a wog. Not much of one, anyway.
Yeah, that's Greece. That part of the world is when you start bringing out the British paint color swab book to figure out what the fuck you're dealing with.
Right.
On one side we have Greek gods, blonde head, blue eyed Greek gods, and then the other side of it we got apparently Drew Pavlo. So
Mhm. Who just keeps getting fatter.
somehow
All right.
in a war zone, in a war zone, gets fatter. it supposedly being detained for protesting gets fatter.
Okay. So the last story on immigration, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre says detainees at an immigration centre in Melbourne's north have rioted because a man there was not receiving adequate health care. Yeah, we see this every now and then. There's like unrest in these centres and they like climbing on the roof.
Mm.
Some of them go on hunger strike and stuff like that. Um, I really doubt that's what this was. I mean, we know that sometimes detainees make like outrageous kind of medical demands, or they just do something stupid to themselves, like give themselves a vegetable oil penis enlargement, as
Uh,
one guy from
yeah.
Iran did.
I know we hype on this, but yeah, we're not making that up, fucking viewer. That is what an Iranian did in detention. He injected fucking vegetable oil into his dick and balls.
And then he was a beneficiary of the Medivac program, and he was moved on shore to Australia. And I don't know what happened to him since, but the vast majority of those people who came here under the Medivac laws stayed here
It's like
because
one of the end of those college movies, and it's like Hasim Abdul fucking whatever continued to inject vegetable oil until his dick and balls until he died of sepsis in 2022
oh, man.
after a botched vegetable injection to his dick and balls.
Yeah, well, look, the Border Force said that there was a fire started. So this was Broadmeadows in Melbourne,
Okay.
and that it has caused significant damage.
Hmm.
Uh, I just find that I think a lot of the time what's happened is that these people have been they're told that Australia is just some kind of a paradise, and you know what? Compared to where they come from, it probably is. But then they just get incredibly frustrated when they get locked up instead, uh, put in immigration detention, and they're thinking, this is not what I paid that dodgy bloke for. He told me I was going
Yeah.
to get in, no questions asked, and I could just get into the workforce straight away. Instead, I find myself in a detention centre. And yeah, when that isn't run like a hotel, well, they end up rioting. All right, let's move on to all things to do with hate speech and the Israel Palestine conflict. Now, how could we not start with this story? So, we know that, like, right after the caravan plot, which the New South Wales police now agree with white nationalists that it was a hoax. Ever since that hoax, we did get two separate sets of laws rammed through our parliaments, the Commonwealth and New South Wales, uh, adding so called hate speech uh, to criminal legislation, meaning that it does now fall under the ambit of criminal law rather than just tort. But now Victoria have their own version too. I would say that, however, they would have passed this eventually. The caravan just kind of sped things up a bit, I think.
Yeah. Nice little
Um,
convenient fucking false flag.
yeah, yeah. So Victoria have theirs now, uh, called anti-vilification and social cohesion reforms. And Jacinta Allen, the Premier, has declared that Victoria is now home to the strongest framework of any jurisdiction in the nation. So, in other words, they have the harshest hate speech laws in the country. And yeah, probably true. So, there are two new criminal offences for instances of serious vilification, uh, and they expand existing legal protections against religious and racial vilification to cover disability, gender identity, sex, sex characteristics, sexual orientation, and personal association with a person who has a protected attribute. I don't know if that just means
Okay.
like you can't, if someone is friends with someone from a victim group, you can't attack that friend. Is that what that means? I'm not really sure.
I guess we'll find out as it's tried.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, and I'm sure we'll get a few. So, if you are found guilty, uh, so the criminal offences include inciting hatred, serious contempt, revulsion, or severe ridicule, or of threatening physical harm or property damage against a person or a group based on a protected attribute. You will face 5 years in prison, or up to 5 years imprisonment. I believe the New South Wales laws said you would receive up to 2 years imprisonment. So Victoria has gone one better here. Now, oh wait, one last thing before we get on to the most controversial part of it. The government said that these laws could capture posting photos on social media that severely ridicule a person with disability or expressing hateful comments about a group's race at a public meeting. So I don't know if you post a video like making fun of a handicapped person or something, would that mean
I
you'd fall under
guess.
you know, like Dennis Leary's song where he makes fun of handicapped people? Would that fall under this? Maybe it would.
Is calling someone retarded a crime then?
Well, yeah. I mean, or like a spastic or something. Like it seems like it. And I mean, the disabled are sort of like a group that have put their hands up in recent years to say, hey, what about us? Like you say it's wrong to be homophobic and racist or whatever, but it seems to be perfectly fine for you to mock disabled people. I remember that Barnaby Joyce actually got in the shit because he said that someone chucked a spaz attack. Do you remember that?
Oh,
Oh,
God.
that had to make me laugh because that was something I don't think I'd actually heard since primary school when someone chucks a spaz
Spaz
attack.
attack. Yeah.
Anyway, I hope that we're all aware that this isn't the worst part of the laws. The worst part is what has been referred to as the Sam Kerr clause. Now, Sam Kerr,
Yeah.
remember the lesbian from the Matildas, who is like half Pajit, I believe, and she called a cop in the UK stupid and white, yet she got off when it came to the charge of racial vilification. So, what this means is if you are from one of these protected groups, I read out a whole bunch of them just before. These laws basically cannot be used against you.
Oh, there we go. I'm retarded. I am mentally retarded. There we go. Thank you. Is that going to work? No. All right.
So the way they like to phrase this is that it cannot be weaponized against people for whom those laws are supposed to protect. So this is just blatantly admitting that these laws are designed to protect so-called protected groups or victim groups, uh, and they are to be used against people who fall outside of those categories. So what
So
does that
first
mean?
class and second class citizens. All right.
Yeah, that obviously means white people.
Again, like I could say, like, okay, hate speech for protected, hate speech laws protected, protected groups. I categorically do not agree with it. but I can see where it fits into like a liberal framework, right?
Right.
This is the anti-friendly fire clause.
Yeah.
This is literally the segmentation of citizenry.
Yeah, because I mean, every now and then, like someone does actually try to say, use these laws against the victim groups. A good example
Yes.
would be David Leinhelm. I don't know if you remember, like I can't remember what it was exactly, but he basically accused someone of being racist towards him because they referred to him as like an old white man or something like that. Unfortunately, I don't believe he was successful. But obviously, the Sam Kerr incident is a good example of that. And I mean, we've all seen it. It's all on video as well. There's no doubt that you said it.
Is
Fucking
literally
stupid.
in a police cell, fucking clear audio, looking right at the camera, saying it all.
Yes, yes, right. Now, I got to point out that this Sam Kerr clause, this was actually not in the original draft of the bill. This came after crossbench negotiation with the Animal Justice Party and the Greens. So yeah, it was these wackos who gave us that. So here's what what's this guy Georgie Purcell said from the Animal Justice Party. We recently saw in the Sam Kerr trial uh, that the way that laws designed to prevent vilification and discrimination can be weaponized against their intended purpose. It was important to many of us on the crossbench that these new laws were implemented to be accessible for the communities who need them while also not being exploited. So then the Greens MP, who was also part of these negotiations, Gabrielle uh, De Vetri or something, uh, she said that the laws will capture power imbalances and prevent misuse over policed communities. So she said, we know that First Nations and marginalized communities are disproportionately unfairly targeted by police. That's why we fought really hard for these critical changes that protect people experiencing systemic injustice and safeguard these laws from being misused to criminalize people who are already over policed. Now, that is a complete myth. Okay?
Hmm.
Yes, these communities are brought into contact with the criminal justice system more. I love how they word it that way. In other words, they commit more crime, right? That's what that actually means. But that does not mean that they are unfairly treated. And the extent to which they are disproportionately affected is simply reflective of the amount of crime they commit. Yes, they're disproportionately affected, but because they commit higher amounts of crime. Uh, Aboriginal people, for example, are something like 13 times more likely to receive some form of sanction from the criminal justice system. Uh,
Yeah.
and they are the most incarcerated race of people in the world. In the world. Um, oh, it was another group that had something to say on it, the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. So they had warned that without safeguards, the state's new hate speech laws could result in an Aboriginal person being criminalised for actions that challenge oppressive systems and those in positions of power. That's interesting.
Oh, that's
So
interesting
when
language.
so when Lydia Thorpe calls someone a white cunt outside a strip club at 4 in the morning, she's not actually calling him a white cunt. She's challenging an oppressive system uh, and someone who's supposedly in a position of power. That's what they mean by that. That's exactly what they mean. Because they know that Aboriginal people make racially charged comments all the time. And
Oh
they
yeah.
know that given the way this legislation originally would have been drafted would have been to apply to each person equally, they know that many, many Aboriginal people would have fallen foul of the law in the case that those safeguards weren't implemented. So here we go. Now they can continue calling you a white cunt. You can't say anything to
Look,
them, not even in retaliation.
and this doesn't just,
So
sit with inside speech codes or hate speech codes. This sits inside every single facet of our society because our modern day Western liberal system relies on a form of justice which is specifically targeted for each and every individual. It has so many fucking hidden and explicit clauses that would fucking baffle the mind.
yeah, and
Justice
so
is so fucking obscured that we can only know it by a very simple system that we put together as fucking far right Nazis. Yeah,
yeah, so look, this is why on the socials I said that Victoria is now officially anti-white.
it is.
Uh,
It's on paper. It's
Jacinta,
been anti-white for a long period of time, but now it's on paper.
yes, Jacinta Allen has come out and said that her state has the most draconian speech laws in the country, and that she's proud of the fact that safeguards have been implemented to protect the people whom the laws are supposed to protect, while those laws cannot be used against them. In other words, you cannot use these laws against white people, but non-whites can use them against white people. So they're very proudly declaring that. And yes, that means that on paper now, Victoria is officially anti-white. I
Yeah.
mean, every jurisdiction is anti-white to an extent. All right.
Yeah, it just depends. Is it the people within the institution? Is it the institution as it functions? Or is it the black letter law? We've gone from the people within inside the institution to the institution. Now we're at the stage of, at least in Victoria, black letter law.
Right. Yeah. It's there on paper now. Uh, and this is despite the fact uh, that this occurred in a parliament where everyone then knew that the whole caravan plot was a hoax. That doesn't seem to matter.
No.
Now, remember also when New South Wales police announced that, they also said that this, criminal network, they never actually used any details on who makes up this criminal network. All they did was give us the name of like one guy who was connected to the nomads. And dare I say they named
Yeah.
him because he's Arab, you
Yeah,
know?
he was a middleman, etc. And then they speculated like, oh god, this was like put undue speculation a whole bunch of groups, and it's like, and then you go and name it an Arab. Okay,
Right. And
who
no
the
one
fuck was
else.
he getting paid by?
Yeah, and they're still not telling us that. But remember that when New South Wales Police did make a statement on all this, they said, yeah, look, not only is the caravan plot a hoax, but pretty much all these other ones, like all this graffiti and vandalism and fire bombings, even, you could arguably say that Josh Burns's office was firebombed. He's like all of that stuff is fake as well. You know, when people spray paint the word Israel and spell it incorrectly,
Mm,
it's usually not to do with masterminds.
no, I mean
People are getting
there are
paid to
master
do this.
mimes.
Okay. Anyway, let's move off that. So, um, the other day, the ECAJ, Executive Council of Australian Jury, hosted what was basically a debate between the Wentworth MP, Allegra Spender, and Ro Knox, who is the Liberal candidate for Wentworth. Um, Wentworth, you may know, is actually the most Jewish electorate in the country. Its expensive suburb, Rose Bay, sometimes gets called Nose Bay.
Yep.
In fact, I think that was a joke on Nova Radio or something. Um, they made that. Uh, but anyway, this debate was essentially Ro Knox and Allegra Spender trying to convince the audience that they were the more philo-Semitic of the pair. So, uh, Um, yeah. So Ro Knox talked about her long-term relationship with Israel since she had studied in 1995 at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She said, "My pledge is, as a member of Wentworth, I will listen to you. I will hear and feel the Jewish community's concerns, and I will take those concerns to camera and actually do something about it. We need to create policy, and we need to implement policy which will make the life of your children and your grandchildren and the children of all Australians so much better." They still have to universalize it in the end, just to sort of make it look like they're not just particularly talking about Jewish people. Um, so
Yeah.
Ronox also pledged that the Liberal Party will not be funding UNRWA in any form. Now, remember that is the UN humanitarian relief body that basically feeds
Oh my
starving.
god, they're funding Hamas.
Yeah. So, and the reason why, because remember, like many countries, like simultaneously froze their funding of UNRWA when it was revealed that they employed some members of Hamas. And like we said many times before, that's just simply because Hamas has people who have day jobs. You know, fight for Hamas is not all they do with their time. They have to actually go out and earn some money. And not a surprise that humanitarian relief is a pretty big industry in Palestine. So it makes sense that they would be working for it.
Oh, did
So
they?
anyway,
Did you hear the follow up on the most recent spat of like some quote unquote Australian really brownoid UN humanitarian aid workers who were shot dead in
oh yeah,
Gaza?
yeah. So
They're like the IDF forces were like, oh my god, they scared us. They approached us without lights and they were firing weapons, and it turns out one
lights
of their
were on.
phones was a recording. And it's just
Yeah,
like the lights were on, they're just like driving, and then like some ADF soldiers turns around, just unloads on them.
yeah. They killed 15 people, and yeah, the official story was the whole time that they didn't have their lights on, so therefore they couldn't identify the vehicle. Now the video has been released showing that they did. Like everything, basically every kind of security protocol that they were meant to follow, they did follow, and Israel just lied and about all of that and just said, no, we just didn't know who it was. Bullshit.
I'll give Rothbone this, that fucking communist. He is right on, Israeli fucking like PR talking points and how it's like a slow burn of like we didn't do it. Oh no, they did it. Oh, no, we didn't do it, they did it. Okay. They did it and they didn't mean it. Okay, we did it, but we didn't mean it. Okay, we did it and we meant it, but it was an accident and we're gonna do an investigation into this and
Yeah, well, that's what I
we
was going to
found
say.
ourselves not guilty. Yeah.
Don't worry because Israel has announced their own investigation into it. And I'm
God damn,
sure that will solve everything.
money, please.
So, oh yeah, here's what Ro Knox said about funding uh, Palestinian relief. He said, "For us, the Australian government, in a cost of living crisis, when people work so hard for their tax dollars, for us to be spending that on an organisation as compromised as UNRWA, it's not good enough." Is that right? Why are you pledging over $30 million to the synagogue then that they burned out themselves? And that they already have donation
Allegedly.
funding and already have insurance paid out to them. Why is it that you're committing over $30 million to that, to the Adras synagogue? How can you justify that in a cost of living crisis? Or the security grants that you keep handing out, or the $25 million that you gave to the UCAJ as part of social cohesion spending? All of that's fine.
Hmm. Oh boy.
Okay, now on the other side, Allegra Spender said that she is standing up against anti Semitism and that will always be her top priority. She said, I'm not doing this just for you. This is personal. I am the child of an immigrant. My mum's family came to Australia from Italy after the Second World War for a better life, and we are immensely grateful for what this country has done for us. What makes this country great is that everyone here is welcome when the Jewish community is scared and under threat. This is not just a problem for the Jewish community, it is a problem for all of us and standing up. Again, she tries to universalize it at the end of the statement. Standing up against anti Semitism is about standing up for the values of our country and the values of my family, and it will always be my top priority. She also said that not enough is being done to stop hate preachers. Think of those muftis in Western Sydney riling up the crowds and that. Uh,
Yep.
but this is the same woman though who said that white nationalists with signs that say "destroy pedo freaks." She said that should be deemed to be hate speech under the criminal law as well. And amazingly, that amendment was turned down. All right. Now, over in the seat of Macnamara, this is an inner city Melbourne seat that is held by Labor. It's held by one of their Jewish MPs, Josh Burns. An audio recording has leaked, and this was at a community meeting that was held prior to the Adass synagogue firebombing. So, in that recording, Josh Burns assured voters that he would be doing everything to prevent a Greens candidate from winning the inner city seat of Macnamara. And so he said to give him time and watch this space.
Yeah, boy.
We said, watch this space. You need to give me some time to ensure that I can have conversations that I need to have internally with the party. I completely do not, under any circumstances, want to see a Greens member in Macnamara, and I'll be doing everything I can to ensure that. So, I don't know, from that, he seems to be hinting that Labor may actually put the Greens last on some how to vote cards, uh, particularly in areas like this, like Macnamara, where you do actually have a sizable Jewish population. Um, and the vast majority of Jews, especially since October 7, basically see the coalition as the better option.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I was gonna say I'm just waiting for some kind of weird Suing character to step into the Greens and be weirdly but progressively pro-Jewish.
right. Okay. Now, oh yeah. So Adam Bandt, the leader of the Greens and the member from Melbourne, he recently said, controversially, that it will be up to the Palestinians to determine what role Hamas holds in their future. Now, Labor Party does not say that. They say that any future, particularly that of a Palestinian state, has no room for Hamas in it. Uh, the Greens say no, that's not for us to judge. Uh, Hamas is a political entity that can run in elections, and they should simply be voted for or against, as is the democratic process. Um, so he said, we've said very clearly what Australia has to do is support Palestinians and Israelis to have their rights of self determination under international law respected. Clearly, the people of the region will express their preferences about who's involved in the future and what happens going forward. Our role should be to ensure that the killing stops and to then ensure that there is a just and lasting peace. and that includes for both Israelis as well as for Palestinians. And that's going to be on terms that work for them. He's often very evasive, Adam Bant. Um, he didn't put it in simple terms, like, they're a political party and they simply run in an election. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, he was basically saying, look, it shouldn't be a policy to take out Hamas. And I mean, that just might be a bit of political realism because something like 70% of Gazans support Hamas, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless you kill all of those people as well, which Israel maybe nearly did, I don't know. Even if you were to wipe out everyone who was in Hamas, they would be replaced. There's plenty of people to go around, and they would step in. Or if you even dismantled Hamas completely, it would be like when Bob Hawke deregistered the BLF, the Builders Labourers Federation. They'll just form a new entity and call it something else. The idea that you're going to remove the element of political Islam from Palestine is just a fantasy.
Again, that's all they fucking have left. You've taken, those like left-leaning progressive Jewish people in Israel were vying for the option just to stake them down with pornography and dumb shit, and that probably would have worked with them over the long time. But you've just blown up everything. They don't have a fucking monitor to watch pornography on. They don't have a market to go buy fucking soy slop and etc. and be dumbed down to an absolute fucking walking husk of what was once called a human that you could fucking oversettle and replace as staunch, culturally confident Israelis. Now you've just made this blob of humanity that you're going to have to disperse across the world, which, they're going to be stochastic terrorism cells across the world because of this, by the way. There's no dumbing them down at this point. You've taken all your tools to dumb them down. You've taken all your tools to fucking make them, I don't know, what's a good word for lethargic?
Inertia. I don't know.
Or something like that. But yeah, again, it's the fucking the optics Jews versus the jignats or whatever the fuck, an old fucking TDS talking point. It is true. There's two parties here, and one party has won very hard and made the world hate Israel, and now left the only solution either to literally start boiling up camps right now on the coast of Israel and start exterminating these people, or throw them to European countries where, well, yes, there will be a burden on the European peoples of that country, but then you'll just have the chance that an actual attack is done in a synagogue, or an actual hate crime is done to your people.
No, this ain't over yet, and neither of the incursions in Gaza. It's certainly a fragile piece at the moment, to be very generous. And yet, they'll continue with their policy of mowing the lawn in Gaza, which is a term that Israel does use. Basically means you go and kick the shit out of the Palestinians, use them like a punching bag every so often, to just to remind them who's boss.
To keep these motherfuckers in line.
All right, so now we will talk about the tariffs. So this was, Trump referred to it as Liberation Day. He came out with this big chart that showed other countries and the tariffs that they place on America or American industries. And he said that this was all reciprocal. So, if you put a 10% tariff on them, they'll put a 10% tariff on you. Now, most Australian industries have been whacked with a 10% tariff. Albo said that had this been reciprocal, the tariff would have been zero, because we do have the The Australia-United States Free Trade Agreement that was inked by the Howard government back when we committed our troops to Iraq. Remember, that was basically part of the deal. We support the Iraq War. We get a free trade agreement with the states. That was a big thing in the news at the time that the anti-war movement was emphasizing. But that said, we do have a ban on American beef, and that is said to be what Trump is concerned about. The fact that we actually just don't buy any of their beef whatsoever, which, yes, is a form of protectionism. It's a form of trying to protect the Australian beef trade. If we did open up the market like that,
no.
well, our beef farmers would go belly up.
Well, the one of the problems is that when you make like an overarching trade agreement, you need to kind of unify regulations. That fucking bridge would be an absolute monstrous task to cross with the United States. And plus, the United States like nominally consumes its entire domestic market of beef. The idea is like, oh, they're missing out on speculative business because, like, oh, okay, so if Australia was buying American beef, the Americans could expand their production, therefore profits. It's like, yeah, maybe. The real situation with American beef is you go over to America and you'll find Australian beef at like a high-end bistro, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
no, not something like massive, not a ritzy stuff, but they'll be like, oh yes, Australian stuff, Australian beef from insert fucking whatever, beef station over here. Insert from whatever station that is next to a dairy over here. That's about the case, and that's been a good option because Australian beef sellers have been able to sell to Americans at a price that is slightly higher than their equivalent domestic, but also the American beef market for the consumer, just because Americans eat so much fucking beef every single fucking day. I mean, what the fuck is a hamburger, my guys? That the actual supply amount has been able to grow 3% year upon year. I think it's actually 5 or 6% year upon year. I have to check that, but that's a healthy growth rate for a business.
Right.
So it's kind of whining about nothing, just short and skinny.
Yeah. So look, I'll just go through a few more things about the details of these tariffs before I get to how we might negotiate them. So, when the Liberation Day, so when these tariffs took effect, you had the All Ordinaries shave off nearly $70 billion. You also had many people forecasting a recession in America, in China, and the UK, and multiple other countries I saw. And needless to say that libertarians are going absolutely off their heads about this.
A state action that absolutely fucked with the market this bad. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, and they'll say that having a current account deficit is kind of irrelevant because that imbalance of trade simply exists within the private sector. It's not to do with government debt. So yeah, I mean, while libertarians are against government debt and deficit, they're not necessarily opposed to having like a gross debt in that's made up of the private financial markets. So therefore, they don't support tariffs. Libertarians also love to tell you that tariffs are what leads to war. They'll even go as far as to say that if tariffs did not exist within America prior to the Civil War between the North and the South, that Civil War could have been entirely averted, and that slavery had nothing to do with it. They reckon it was all just about tariffs.
No, it was about two different. Well, I mean, it was about tariffs because you had the industrialized North versus the agrarian South. But the problem is, the agrarian South was more responsible for its export slash like local political stability, and the industrial north managed to produce an absolute shit ton of capital because it was you know industrialized.
Right.
So that was a shot there. That was having two functionally different. That was having two different fucking countries in one country, to be honest. But yeah,
Yeah. So, and also, um, the the territory of Norfolk Island. This is an island often forgotten. Um,
yeah,
they're just there's only 2,200 people there on this tiny, like, kind of uh, self-sustained island. That it's basically a bunch of people who want to live the quietest life possible, but they've actually had a 29% tariff whacked on their so-called exports, and they basically don't export anything. So, like, why the hell would you pick on Norfolk Island?
they're also saying about like the McDonald and was it Howard Islands or something. It's like, oh, they're islands and their only residents are penguins. They're only like permanent residents are penguins. It's like, well, yeah, but also they're a territory of Australia, so that's why. Like as an Australia, if I was to register an ABN, I could register it on that island and then go and trade. If I wasn't subject to the same tariffs and etc. the rest of Australia was, then guess where every single fucking export company would be registered tomorrow.
Right. Um, so there's also talk that this might affect the kind of cars we have on the Australian market. Like, remember, like, we don't get all car models in Australia. I do remember
Nope.
reading that, like, there's a few models of Mazda, for example, where they just don't even bother to sell them in Australia. Um, so that's going to make uh, car makers rethink all of that as well. And they might actually lift prices or even just pull models completely from the start of the new financial year. The other thing, of course, impacting that decision are these bloody carbon emission laws. The new, what are they called? Like, well, short story is it's the government making cars that emit more carbon more expensive than, say, a Tesla. So they're going to be hit with a double whammy. They're hit with these tariffs, but they're also hit with these bloody ridiculous laws that we're putting in. So that actually just might mean a whole heap of cars that Australians want to buy simply will not be on the market because it just wouldn't make economic sense for them to sell them here. Now, what can we actually do about this? Uh, I don't believe the Liberals for a second that if Peter Dutton were the Prime Minister right now, that he somehow would have negotiated an exemption. They seem to be saying that because last time, uh, the first Trump administration, they did actually negotiate Australian exemptions,
Yeah.
but so did many other countries, though. Uh, Trump was not as serious about tariffs in that uh, first term than he is now. Um, this has been much more across the board. Uh, I mean, for example, do you know that these tariffs even apply to Israel? And further to that, he actually made the tariffs bigger in Israel than he did in Iran.
Mashallah, we shall see the small serpent die at the hands of the big serpent.
So I was actually reading an article from
It's because they don't fucking trade with Iran. Like, when the fuck was the last time you saw, like, in
yeah,
America, you went and picked something up and it literally said product of Iran? There's no fucking point. You see product
yeah,
of Israel in America the entire fucking time. I'm surprised there's any tariff on Israel, but I don't know.
yeah. So
That's
there
the only
was
thing that
I was
surprises me.
reading. This is obviously a publication that I read very little of nowadays, but Reason.com. And they pointed out that prior to the tariffs taking effect, Israel actually dropped all of its tariffs from American goods. And apparently, that's like the idea that if you threaten other countries with tariffs, then they'll take down the ones that they impose against you. Um, but for whatever reason, Trump actually imposed 17% tariffs on all imports from Israel. And that was after Israel dropped their tariffs against Iran. Whereas Iran is actually hit with 10% tariffs. So, yeah, interesting.
Oh God, America's gonna have to pay for this injustice.
Now, what is it that Albo could actually do about this? So, apparently, there is a plan to stockpile. They're working on a plan to stockpile key critical minerals to use as leverage against or with Donald Trump. Um, so the Australian newspaper, they say anyway, they've got inside information that the Trump administration is considering a tariff deal with Australia that would incorporate a critical minerals agreement designed to address US strategic priorities. So, in other words, it sounds like we just need to be providing them with really cheap minerals, and then maybe they'll maybe just take down the rate of the tariffs that they have imposed on us.
Well, the thing is, I think a lot of people are terrified by the shock of the opening of the markets this morning, etc. But they don't realize that, like, yeah, tariffs are a shock to the market because they are, in a way, fixing price or fixing an extra cost to a price and da 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 da. But markets can very easily stabilize that because it's quite a fixed and known amount.
Yeah.
It's literally they're just waiting for fucking exporters to be like, okay, this is how I adjust my rates.
Now the other way, of course, is we would allow American beef imports because if there's anything reciprocal about this, it's America punishing us for banning their beef industry from trading in Australia. Um, well, I guess that would be one way of doing it, but then you kill our beef market. So that's just not something I'd be interested in doing.
No,
So I would just say,
and not
well,
necessarily because it's higher quality.
no. But our farmers have already taken enough of a hit. I mean, like when we deregulated dairy and sugar, that was devastating, particularly in Queensland, and that was when you started to see suicide rates really jump in regional areas.
Yes.
So, um,
Oh, you saw fucking people selling up and killing themselves on fucking dairy farms back in like the early 80s when we were forced to turn the actual dairy farms of dairy into a distillery, which is the more, I guess, modern form of a dairy, which you get your like your shitty fucking like look at all the added things in this in this jug of milk, type tier milk. And yeah, no, that was happening back then. So yeah, I can still fucking imagine it happening, especially sugar in Queensland.
hmm. So anyway, while Trump visits his multiple golf courses and everything, Australia is simply one country in a long queue that want to negotiate some kind of deal. And, this is said to be all part of Trump's art of the deal. Like, whack those tariffs on and then wait for the parties to come to you with all different kind of proposals as to why you should take those tariffs away or at least reduce them. And apparently, yeah, they're the two ideas being floated for Australia: offer them cheap minerals or allow them to trade beef in Australia. Let's see what happens. Okay, now here was an idea that was quickly rebuked. So Peter Dutton was saying that we should use our defense relationship with the United States as leverage when it comes to negotiating the effect of tariffs. Um, Now, this was one of the. I remember they were touting Dutton as the superior negotiator because of the fact that he was part of the AUKUS agreement.
Oh
He
God.
helped negotiate that. Um, that was with Joe Biden, though, so I don't see really how that's relevant. That's not something great on your resume, I don't think. Um,
No.
but anyway, Dutton said, "We have troops in the north of our country. We have the AUKUS deal. We have the ANZUS treaty." And then he said that, look, he wasn't trying to suggest that Australia should pull back on its defence commitments with the US. In fact, he was saying the opposite, and that is that we should engage in more defence cooperation, with the US. And he cited opportunities under the existing AUKUS arrangements that could make that happen. So, in other words, he wants us to fucking bend over further for the US when it comes to their military bases in Australia and just how much we commit our own military um, to the wishes of America. So, that doesn't sound like very tough negotiation to me. That basically says, hey, I know we can become more of Australia's bitch. Now,
America's
John Howard,
bitch.
yes. So, yeah. John Howard said that this was stupid. Um, he said that defense and national security should always be kept separate from trade. Uh, and that basically these comments were reckless. So this seems to be another one of those sort of Peter Dutton thought bubbles that probably will just go nowhere.
Gosh. I mean, how the fuck do you keep those two things separate? Yes, I expect some kind of like mutually beneficial military alliance, but I'm a small boutique army, and you are, the America still is the leading, if not like the equal. I'm gonna say the leading. I've seen too much fucking like anti-NAFO bullshit for the other side. Um, but yeah, no, the leading military. Like, how do you equal that out? Yeah, by the way, for your perceived alliance with us or written alliance with us, yeah, we're going to allow you to rape our economy. That's normally the deal.
Yeah. Oh, God. All right. Anything else to say on the tariffs before we move on to housing?
That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, on to housing. Um, in New South Wales, we might remember that they've introduced uh, a ban on no grounds evictions. So, in other words, if you do evict someone from a rental property, you must actually be able to prove why you're doing it. You have to have a good reason. Those laws are due to take effect in May, but
I
there would
guess
be
who's
another
getting
thing.
evicted before May?
Right, right. So this is another area where I haven't read the commentary, but I know libertarians would say, see, uh, it ends up having the opposite effect of what you want because yeah, that's what's happening. There
Would
has been a
you
huge
use the
uptick.
bad tenant in the room against me?
Yes. So landlords have expectedly, considering we're now approaching that deadline, they have been kicking out a lot of tenants because they fear they would not be able to kick them out after May. So yeah, I reckon what they should do in the considering this is happening is basically you want to be able to rush through the laws, and we know that government can do that. Okay? Remember how quickly they got through the Commonwealth hate speech laws or the New South Wales hate speech laws? New South Wales themselves have demonstrated that they can pass laws very, very quickly to take immediate effect. Well, why don't they do it here then? Considering you've got all these dodgy landlords booting people out.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, so the coalition has promised to relax um, financial laws from the financial regulator for the approval of home loans. So we've heard like ideas floated before, like uh, a bank can't take into account if the person seeking the loan has a HEX debt, for example. Um, I said at the time I don't really, I really kind of doubt the utility of these measures. Um, it's pointed out that nearly 40% of first home buyers are not able to get a loan due to what's called the serviceability buffer. And that basically means like you won't get a loan if you have too many marks against your name. If you've got a bad credit history, if you had like unpaid credit cards, that kind of thing. And then, like I said, a HEX debt or outstanding debts in other areas. Obviously, if you aren't a high income earner, all those kind of things would prevent you from getting a home loan. But look, let's remember that they basically did this in America. Remember the whole subprime collapse? What was it didn't account for all of it, but it was an enormous contributor to what we then went and called the GFC, the the financial crisis, uh, because you had well, in America they have like what is it, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac or whatever. You were like these institutions that would give loans to people who otherwise would not get one, and that included a
Yep.
hell of a lot of racial minorities. And so all of those safeguards that banks would put in place so that they would not loan to people who would not be able to pay the money back, those safeguards were removed. All of a sudden, you had all these people who owned houses, but also had a huge mortgage to pay. Uh, and because they weren't good at managing their finances, they defaulted. And yeah, that was like a huge contributing factor to the global financial crisis. Why would we want to replicate that here? Um, this is not something that we should be tinkering with. And again, it just shows our desperation to resort to secondary solutions when we refuse to acknowledge what the primary cause is, which is immigration. Okay? We don't have enough houses for the amount of people that are coming into this country. It's as simple as that. So there shouldn't be any discussion of having to uh, make the serviceability buffer less restrictive, or that banks shouldn't be able to take a HEX debt into consideration, or whatever. Um, banks, insurance companies, they're actually pretty good at determining what is a risk factor and what isn't. And if you start fucking around with that, you're going to get a hell of a lot of people who would take out these loans and simply not pay them back. They would simply default. And that's not good for anyone if that happens. So, I don't know. What do you think, Nolsey? Am I being too free market orientated there?
Normally, sometimes you are, but at that point, man, it's a lot of people say like, oh yeah, well, access to finance, and this is like the ever increasing definition of human rights when you talk to a leftoid. And don't talk to a leftoid about economics. They are end result focused. They don't actually care about the mechanisms between point A and point B, and I can be that way too. Um But credit was a recent invention. Is it necessarily a good idea? Has stuff happened with credit? Yeah. But honestly, past behavior of a person is indicative of future behavior. Do I like learning interest and etc. as a thing entirely? No. But no, I mean, we can't do it. I don't think the world could survive another 2008.
No, and I mean that this isn't me saying like, look, I would actually favour like state banks that could, hand out low interest loans to people. I don't have any problem with that. That would be fine. But we just don't live in that world. We live with these cutthroat big four banks in Australia, and that's really your only option. So you've got to play by those rules. And yeah, I just can't support anything that would increase like um, people defaulting on their loans. And what does that mean for their future anyway? You're not doing those people any favors either. You know, they would be doomed to live in just complete poverty for the rest of their lives should they ever do that, default on a loan like that. Okay. Now, Mark Latham has found himself in a little bit of hot water again. One of the proposals to alleviate the housing crisis in New South Wales is for the what are they called? The Australian Turf Club. So they have a plot of land. So it's the Rose Hill Racecourse, and they're going to sell it to the state government for $5 billion, and that apparently is going to be mean that 25,000 homes and a metro station will be constructed on that racecourse.
I was going to say turning a race course into a suburb. That's interesting.
It is. So Mark Latham has been an opponent of this project since the beginning, and it is very unpopular among members of the Turf Club, the Australian Turf Club. And Mark Latham himself is actually a member of the Australian Turf Club. Um, Now, what Latham did was uh, he turned up at one of these events the other day, and apparently he had a red hot crack at Steve McMahon, who is the government relations boss of the Australian Turf Club. So I believe that this guy is like the number one man in terms of negotiating that deal with the state government. And this was an expletive ridden exchange that occurred. So here's their statement. They said the Australian Turf Club is investigating an incident of alleged unprovoked verbal abuse by an ATC member against a senior ATC official. The incident was witnessed by
Okay.
several people, and an investigation is continuing. Yeah, so
Think we know what happened there.
yeah. Now, I mean,
Why the fuck are you doing this, you dumb fucking guy?
yeah, look, this was Mark Latham, so he would have said something along those lines, I would say.
Yep.
He's at that sort of like manic stage of the bipolar phases that he goes through.
Yeah. That and his
Um,
age, like they just get grumpier as they get older.
yeah, but look, I mean, Mark Latham, whatever you want to say about him, he is a guy who has said from the beginning, or for like pretty much ever since he left the Labor Party, that the reason why you have massive traffic congestion and massive house prices and rental prices in Sydney, because he's from Sydney, is because of immigration. And, he's just pointing to this little project, like converting a race course into a suburb. He was just saying, look, this is another like band aid solution. It's another secondary solution because you refuse to look at the primary problem.
Boy, mate, this is just one of those chiseled stones in the pyramid. Which is unironically true, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's right. Maybe he didn't have to go and swear his head off at this bloke, but, you know.
I would have. I would have.
I can't see, yeah, I mean, I can't see this as the crime of the century or anything by any measure.
Going to a fucking country club, getting drunk, and verbally abusing your peers is a right given to us by God. If you earn enough money to go to a country club, you get to abuse people in the same tax bracket that you're in.
Okay, fair call. I've never been a member of a country club, so I wouldn't know how good that feels.
I've been to 3. They all suck, and they make you want to kill yourself and become a socialist, like a socialist revolutionary thereafter. I don't recommend the experience.
All right. Well, let's move on to industrial relations. Now, Peter Dutton has walked back his criticism of the public service, basically exploiting work from home conditions. So he said that when it comes to stopping people working from home, he's emphasized that he's not talking about anyone in the private sector, and that when it comes to the public sector, he's only talking about those who work in Canberra. Now, this is not what was said before. The spokeswoman, Jane Hume, for the coalition previously said that there was an expectations of taxpayers that all members of the APS work from the office 5 days a week. All right, that seemed to be pretty clear language to me, that she was saying that the entire public service should be working in the office and not from home all the time. Well, apparently
Yes.
not. So they have apparently been facing backlash because, believe it or not, there still are Liberal voters within the public service. So they've walked that back, and just work from home conditions have been popular since COVID, and since so many of us got used to working from home at least a couple of days a week during COVID.
Yeah.
So they know it's not a vote winner. I don't know why they went and bothered with it to begin with, to be honest.
Well, again, like Peter Dunne's being like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna fucking roll this all back," and then he actually got bullied. But I can tell you the pressure to make people, at least in the private sector, work from home, and that's literally because Boss Man wants to have building because building has logo on it. Logo, it allows him to advertise to his people at the whatever club, saying, "Oh, look at my immaculate office building," and the person he's leasing it from is saying, "Hey, look." I want foot traffic through this place because foot traffic means it doesn't become decrepit or abandoned or security becomes an issue. So you got the lease person or the person that they're leasing from telling the business owner tells their local constituent, hey, look, I actually want legislation to force my workers to come back. I know that the public sector does actually lease office buildings, so I would imagine it would be the same thing in the public sector.
Yeah, but also it's to do with the fact that the Australian Public Service, when they come to work, they will buy their coffee and their hot chocolate and their lunch at the surrounding shops.
Which is probably owned by the same person who leased the office building. Yeah. Or at least leased by the same person who's leased the office building.
Yeah, that was the thing. So, like, business owners, or the business lobby generally, were strongly opposed to work from home laws because it stopped the public service from being consumers of their products. Very simple. So, yeah, it would have been that, and I think it's also just an ideological bent of the Liberal Party as well. They generally just dislike people in the public service, and so they They have those expectations that they should be working as hard as they possibly can to earn those publicly funded dollars. But is it actually a vote winner? No, no way. Okay, so Labor will make a submission to the Fair Work Commission. This is for their annual wage review, calling for the minimum and award wages to be increased by more than inflation.
Ooh,
Um,
bold play,
so
Cotton.
that's still not very much because, I mean, what's the current inflation rate now? I believe it's like below 3%. I'm only talking about the official inflation rate. That is
2.4.
2.4. Okay,
The
there you
CPI index in January was 2.5. As of March, 2.4.
go. Okay, and what's a 2.4% pay increase to someone on a minimum wage? It's bugger all.
A fart in a
Now,
jar.
oh wait, sorry. So no, I do know what the figure is. So, well, I'm not sure about the federal government, but the union, the ACTU, they are looking or pressuring the Fair Work Commission to give a 4.5% increase to the minimum wage, and also another body that is calling for that amount is the Australian Catholic Church. Um, speaking of libertarian publications that I used to read, and maybe on occasion will read today. There was this guy I used to follow a lot called Johan Norberg, who's a Swedish libertarian. He used to love posting quotes from the Pope. And not the current Pope, not Pope Francis, but the previous Pope, Benedict, whose real name is Ratzinger, I think. He's dead now.
Yeah.
Anyway, that Pope was always like labeled to be like a far right extremist. I'm not sure we remember that, but like
Yeah.
because he was a real like traditional Catholic. That's definitely true. However, he would every now and then make commentary on global capitalism, and he would always sound like a socialist when he did so. He would talk about like the corrupting effects of materialism, but he would also talk about how the rich get a bigger piece of the pie all the time. So it is kind of funny when you look at the Catholic Church and you look at just simply their views on the economy and industrial relations. A lot of people would be actually quite surprised to find that, you know, they're not just parroting what the H.R. Nichols Society is saying. They're actually
Yeah.
fairly left-leaning on a lot of this stuff, if you do pay attention to it. Okay, now in terms of what the coalition would do with IR if they were voted in, we certainly know what they're being pressured to do. So the business lobby is looking for them to scrap the same jobs and same pay laws. However, Dutton has basically said they have no intention of doing that. So these are the laws that basically say that, like, if you're hired through a labour hire outlet, you should be earning the same amount of money as someone who is employed directly through that employer. And as we know, there's already been a number of wins out of this, like airline baggage handlers, for example. They
Yes.
got a pretty big pay increase because those people being hired through labour hire, I remember they were on something like 50 grand a year, something just pitiful. Whereas the people who were directly employed through the airlines were on like 65 or something. They were on a decent chunk more. So I don't think it's been a surprise that those laws have actually been well received by the general public. There's not many people out there who will say, no, I think baggage handlers should only get 50K a year for a full-time job. You're essentially promoting wage slavery at that point. So I can't imagine Dutton rolling back that policy. However, there are other areas. For example, the right to what's it called? The right to turn off or tune out. I forget what.
Disconnect.
Yes, those. So, like when it comes to taking calls or answering emails outside of working hours, Labor says no, you should be able to refuse those. Dutton has hinted that they will wind those laws back. So,
Oh boy.
yeah. The other big one, of course, is patent bargaining, where you make wide agreements between a union. So it would no longer be simply between a union and an employer, or a union and an employer for a particular project. It would be across the whole industry. This is what we now call multi-employer bargaining. It used to just be called
We
patent
went over that a
bargaining.
lot.
Yeah, and
I think
Dutton has
wasn't
also
there like
hinted that they'll roll that back.
some slight differences literally making multi-employer bargaining actually shitter than patent bargaining? It's like, oh god, like they're actually more restrictive. It's like, oh, it doesn't have to be the industry; it has to be like a similar section of the industry.
Hmm. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if they did go after that. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
Industrial relations is definitely one of those areas where the Liberal Party is very ideological. They will throw out pragmatism because there's definitely a tradition in Australian conservatism of hating unions and hating industrial law that favours the worker. We'll say. Okay. Finally, on IR, doctors have walked off the job. So
Ooh.
this occurred at public hospitals across New South Wales due to a long-running health dispute. Now we all know about the dispute with the nurses that is still going on. It's been going on for years after they only got like pitiful increases to their pay.
Pittance.
But it's actually affecting doctors now as well. So even you know higher, I'll say higher rather than highly, but higher paid professionals, uh, even they are saying, you're not paying us enough now. So from Tuesday, elective surgeries will be postponed with only emergency procedures to be performed. Outpatient clinics and non urgent consultations will also be cancelled and non urgent medical procedures rescheduled. And that would be from Tuesday for 3 days. All right. So, they're tweaking it so that, no one's going to die as a result of them walking off. They're certainly not walking away from the emergency room or anything like that. Uh, but yeah, public service seems to always be at war with the government in New South Wales. Be it nurses or rail workers or cops or what. Like these pay disputes are always going on.
Why not? It's basically half their job, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Now, for some reason, I've put a separate topic of public service here. Um, Repeating myself. No, but the other thing in terms of cutting back on the public service, not just stopping people from working from home in Canberra, but Dutton has said that the health and education departments and the ABC would be in their sights in terms of wasteful spending. So, I mean, yeah, Dutton needs to tread lightly here because what Labor will always attack the coalition on is potential cuts to health and education. And polls generally show that voters trust Labor more when it comes to health and education. Now, Peter Dutton said that there would be pressure on the ABC to deliver excellence in their broadcasting. He said, I think there's a very good work that the ABC does. And if it's being run efficiently, then we'll keep funding in place. Taxpayers pay for it who work hard, harder than ever just to get ahead. So they would expect us not to support the waste. Well, look, John Howard had been saying stuff like that like back in the mid 90s. And I don't believe that the Howard government ever cut funding to the ABC. Not that I can remember anyway. Um, so,
We're still number 4.
and remember these announcements that Labor have made around like funding Medicare. Remember, they've all just been matched by by Peter Dutton instantly. I was about to say Tony Abbott because I was just thinking, the last time cuts were made to health and education was when Tony Abbott was first elected in 2013. But the thing is, though, a lot of people say that that first budget was the beginning of the end for Tony Abbott because he did promise no cuts to education, no cuts to health, yet he did it. And it was something that remained with him right up to the point where Turnbull knifed him. So I can't imagine Peter Dutton making that same mistake. Okay, now on to climate and energy. So the big announcement this week was that Labor has announced $2.3 billion to subsidise households purchasing solar batteries.
Why?
Well, because, I read a few different figures on this, but it seems to be like that one of these batteries on average costs around $10,000 to install.
The 10K for like
So,
5 kilowatt hours.
yeah. So that would still mean though that you've got to fork out 7K for one of these batteries, and most households don't have that much. They just
No,
don't.
especially because with your Monday battery technology, say it's your Tesla Powerwall. Let's like quickly Google what these say about its fucking lifespan. Powerwall lifespan. 10 years. There we go. 10 years. You're not making $7,000 back in 10 years, let alone $10,000 back. Batteries break even. They're more so a matter of convenience. I've only ever seen people actually demo them or say how practical they are when it comes to blackouts.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, well, okay, because Albo was saying that this now would push power prices down. This time they're not giving a figure. I don't think they ever want to do that again after promising that
It
power
doesn't
bill will come
really.
down by $275. They're not doing that, but they are just saying that it would come down. I thought, well, okay, you're just taking a bit of money off the purchasing price of one of these batteries. Someone would still have to spend about 7 grand. How long would it take for them in savings to actually earn that 7 grand back? Um, and I would actually say that they'd probably never get it back because power prices will continue to rise so long as we keep investing in green energy. So Dutton actually said as much. He said that this was confirmation that electricity prices are certain to go up. Um, so he said the point I'd make is that for a $10,000 battery, maybe that's the cost after the subsidy. I think you're talking about higher income families being in a position to pay for that. Right.
There we go.
So
Upper middle class to upper middle class buy these. High class don't give a shit.
right. So if you can't
High
afford,
class have a fucking LNG generator in their basement.
yeah, if you can't afford one of these, or if you can't just afford a solar panel, then all of this means absolutely nothing to you. Okay, you won't be part of this equation whatsoever, and you will generally just have to keep paying for uh, power prices that just keep going up. So, oh wait, no, sorry, I tell a lie here. The next story I had estimates that households would pay about $4,000 uh, for one of those batteries after it's subsidized by Labor. But still, that's $4,000. That is still a lot of money. I doubt you're going to harness $4,000 worth of solar energy very quickly.
How about this? How about $1,500 for a 9 kilowatt diesel generator, and then you just have diesel in a sealed tank which doesn't go off.
Mm. I'd rather
How about
that.
How about that? I think they'll do you a lot better. I mean, I'm fucking around. I'm doing some weird shit in my place currently. I'm doing some typical nosy shit. I've got my bore pump working again, but I've got really nothing to feed with it. So I was thinking about just literally getting a 10,000 liter tank and putting in this doom garden I've got in the corner and just making a miniature hydroelectric setup with the 10,000 liter tank, the bore pump, and an impeller turbine, and obviously the like 20 to 30 meter drop to the water table here. I could make a little mini sunny hydro in 1,000th of the time.
Right. That's all stuff that kind of goes over my head, I must say.
Water go uphill, and then when you want to, water go downhill. Make power.
Okay. All right, that's a lot easier. Um, okay, now the Teal Independent, talking about Allegra Spender again. She's saying that there should be zero interest loans given out to all households to purchase those batteries. So she's kind of gone one step further. And yeah, it is actually the Teals who, tend to propose stuff like this. Like, they had said for a long time that they did support subsidizing batteries that could be used in houses and small businesses. So,
Well, the only
okay.
problem is like it's with batteries, right? Especially the battery technology they're working on. Batteries shouldn't be used in sedentary installations for electrical stuff. There's much better ways to store power and newer ways to store power for sedentary applications. If we're going to make a lithium battery, fuck, put it in a car, put it in a fucking drone or your phone or something like that. That's where it's best served. That's where its power density does its best. Not on your fucking wall. Just build a gigantic capacitor at the fucking local substation or some shit. It will have literally the exact same fucking electrical result.
Right.
Probably last longer too. Who knows? We need to get an electrical engineer on the show again.
Okay, so also just talking about Peter Dutton's gas reservation policy. This is where he would make suppliers store 20% of gas. This is actually only in the East Coast, by the way.
Yeah.
Reading. Basically, because here in WA we already have a gas reservation program. Um,
Yeah, I
albeit
was listening to ABC Shorts and they're talking about it, saying like, oh, WA's 15% is good. It's a good program. Keeps gas prices low in WA. I was like, low? All right.
no, it just means that we don't run out of it. That's all. um, like there's been projections that Victoria would suffer blackouts and brownouts due to a shortage of gas. In WA, we just don't have that. You know, that scenario just isn't there for us because we've got enough gas stored. But yeah, no, our gas prices are still like, on the national average. Then they're not cheaper. Um, so anyway, this could mean according to a top legal expert, this is an article from the ABC, that the gas reservation policy could see Australian taxpayers effectively subsidising ongoing use of gas. Well, yeah, but that's because you destroyed coal. You know, I mean, if you take away what is a vital source of electricity production, then you need to fill it with something else. Green energy has not been able to do that. Therefore, we have to move to our other reliable source, which is gas. And yeah, because they go on about diversifying the energy market, but by throwing coal out, uh, you did the opposite of diversifying. I can't think of what that word would be.
Investing, but deeply
Yeah.
investing.
So you threw out one of those ingredients. And yeah, what a surprise then that the government might have to take some more drastic measures and say, all right, well, we have to have some kind of reservation policy now for gas. Otherwise, we simply run out of the fuel that can produce electricity. So, yeah, this might mean ongoing subsidization of the industry, but what do you expect and what else can we do? Okay, now on other environment news, you've got the Labor candidate for Bass, Jess Teasdale, who was basically saying that she had made comments in the past saying that native forest logging in Tasmania should just be completely brought to an end. Um, this issue has been a real pain in the side for Labor for decades now. We mentioned Mark Latham before. This was one of the biggest things that lost him the election, was committing to saving old growth forest in Tasmania. So this candidate has had to walk back her statements, saying, no, 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 I do support the forestry industry and I do support all those blue collar jobs that it generates. Um,
That's a weird thing to say.
well, I mean, she didn't quite put it like that. But I mean, that's the balancing act that Labor has to perform in Tasmania because there's a huge workforce of forestry workers there, and a lot of them are members of the CFMEU. Because remember, they're not just a construction union. That F in CFMEU stands for forestry, and they actually sided with John Howard back in what was it, 2004, I think. Yeah, when Mark Latham was the opposition leader. Whereas Mark Latham actually cozied up to Bob Brown and the Greens and said he was going to reserve huge, huge swaths of native forest in Tasmania. And that was very unpopular with traditional Labor constituents, particularly in Tasmania. So they have to be careful that their candidates aren't saying stuff like that. Okay. Now, here was a story I didn't really know what to make of it. They're talking about volunteers who work in renewable energy. They're basically saying that there is not enough propaganda in regional areas of Australia to convince people of the virtues of green energy. Now, why would they say something like this? Because many of these regional areas are the ones where they're building those wind turbines or those solar farms or the transmission lines to those various green energy projects, and thus causing environmental devastation to those regional areas. They're basically saying that the government is not doing enough to tell those people in those areas why green energy is so great. And so they're putting the pressure on the Australian government to engage in more communication and more information hubs to be brought to these regional areas.
We need to tell these dumb fucking hicks why absolutely fucking the ever-loving shit out of those surrounding plots is a good idea.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. Okay, now, the one thing that makes me want to encourage people to vote coalition is the prospect of a Greens, a Labor minority government with the Greens, uh, because they've just said something else regarding what they would demand from a minority Labor government, and that is to lift environmental spending to 1% of the federal budget. So that would mean an extra $17 billion spent on the environment uh, over the next 4 years. Those figures are according to the Greens, though, so we don't know exactly how much it would be. Um, but what's really ironic is the biggest contributions to carbon emissions and to just pollution generally is population growth. And
Well,
when
again, if you
you
take people from where they burn fucking dung for fuel to where, they've got access to diesel power plants or coal power plants or whatever the fuck, yeah, it's going to be way worse.
That's right. Yeah. Um, there are very simple economics behind migration, and there's also very simple ecology behind it as well. You will get more pollution if you import more people into first world industrialized nations. And yet, that is a policy of the Greens.
Yeah. Exact opposite used
But
to be the policy of the Sierra Club until they got a nice big fat fucking check.
so, a North Queensland environment charity has launched legal action against the federal government, and this is to do with a Andrew Forrest-backed renewable energy
Oh
company
god, it's gay.
to build a wind farm near heritage protected wilderness. Now, this is one of those examples of like the left battling among themselves here, because this here is a group that is mainly concerned with animal conservation, and they actually find themselves butting heads with those promoting green energy projects because, well, to build them, you have to actually upset the habitats of many of these animals that they seek to protect. Um, so they go at each other over this. One group saying that no, green energy is more important, whereas the others say no, animal conservation is the more important interest here. So this is Rainforest Reserves Australia. Um, so they run sanctuaries for injured animals, and they're seeking a judicial review of Tanya Plibersek as Environment Minister um, against this wind farm, which is 65 kilometres southwest of Ingham. 69 turbine operation, so pretty big, and that would cover around 600 hectares of habitat that is known to be inhabited by koalas and other vulnerable species. So there you go. You basically have to kill some animals to build these things.
Again, it's the squaring of the circle here. Like these things are non-conducive. If you want to make an installation for green energy, where it's going to be most most like abundant, yeah, it's going to be most abundant in open plains. And where does open plains occur in this country? Oh yeah, right between deeply fucking inhabited fucking forests. Oh wait, okay. You have to cut the roads to go get it, the roads to service it. You have to fucking bring all the equipment out, dig the holes, put the equipment down, get the equipment out to dig the holes, pour the concrete, etc. It's like that thing from Landman over again, which I hate that show, but that part is at least true.
All right. Well, finally, on climate and energy, the coalition has promised that they will abolish the fines imposed on car companies who breach the vehicle emissions standard scheme. So, this is basically making cars with high emissions more expensive. That's the long and short of it. Those companies can actually be fined for not meeting those emission standards. Um, the coalition would scrap that. So, yeah, that's good. Okay, let's turn to Aboriginal news. Um, the the Voice in South Australia is now a year old. Um, it has been deemed by many to be a success because they do have their consultations with the state government of South Australia. They say that they are being listened to, but not everything is being taken on board. So there are concerns about a lack of resources, staff, and travel funding. So they're just talking about money here, and
Oh God,
maybe not getting enough perks of the job. Uh, because they want to be
dear
put up
fucking
in
lord.
fancy accommodation and stuff. Um, and they have made as a point of priority for 2025 uh, the incarcerations rate for Aboriginal Australians, which of course are still at record highs. I believe even the latest Closing the Gap data showed that that's one gap that is definitely not being closed. Um, but something that they're disappointed about is that so far anyway, the government is not interested in raising the age of criminal responsibility. For those of you who don't know, there is currently a massive campaign underway to increase the age of criminal responsibility to 14. And I believe the Greens would go even further. I'm pretty sure they say 16. Uh, it is true that in many jurisdictions in Australia, the age is 10.
It's lower in
And
the NT and it's 14 in most other places. I mean, that's just the rule of thumb. The thing is that like
it's
in
10,
other
it's 10 to
jurisdictions,
12.
you don't have fucking Aborigines, and Aborigines tend to
Right.
commit an absolute shit ton of purposeful, non-remorseful, and targeted crime, even at that age.
Yeah. So, look, United Nations human rights bodies will very often condemn Australia because we apparently violate human rights because we have a lower age of criminal responsibility, or at least in most of our jurisdictions, we do. So, in WA, it's 10, for example.
Yep.
And it is true that if you compare it to other, first world Western countries, it is true that, yeah, that's pretty low. But yes, as you said, they simply don't have these populations of, you know, criminal children.
And it's also the
Uh,
instance where like the older brothers will just get the younger brother to go and commit something, or the parents actually that's something that comes up a lot. The parents have said, "Hey, look, go to the store, go nick a whole bunch of stuff, and if you get caught, whatever." And they'll literally just have these fucking single digit age children go and shoplift for them. On top of the
yeah,
the already the fact that we already pay for their grocery bill, their lights, their housing, etc.
yeah. There's something like that happens in Breaking Bad as well. If you watch that show, there's like this
Oh,
kid.
the kid is the middleman for the drug deals. Yes.
Yes, and they even get him to shoot a rival drug dealer as well. Yeah, that stuff like that does happen. Um, Now, maybe that's not really relatable to the Australian context, but I can tell you what absolutely does happen is 10-year-olds do things like steal cars and drive those cars recklessly. They do. Um, it's like one talent that young Aboriginal people do have. And even Labor governments have been reluctant to increase the age because then, well, all of a sudden you've got a whole bunch of 10, 11, 12, and 13-year-olds where you literally cannot, the law cannot do anything to incapacitate them. They can't be given any kind of custodial sentence whatsoever. Um, so what do you do then? You basically just have to release them so that they can go out
Waggle your
joyriding or
finger at them and
whatever they
say,
try.
"No, no, no, young laddie, don't be doing that," and then send them on their way to do
Yeah.
it again.
Apart from
Probably
wagging
the
your
same
finger at
day.
them, yeah, you can't do anything. Um,
God.
Now, in Queensland, there are calls to bring in the banned drinker registry. So this is something that is ineffective in the Northern Territory and also here in WA. Um, Now, I'm kind of surprised. Um, so this is Queensland's cross-border commissioner who called for joint policing on the state's border with the Northern Territory, and also for the banned drinker registry. Um, we've got this in WA as well, which is just kind of stupid because I mean, in terms of takeaway alcohol, these people who are on a banned list, they just get someone else to buy it for them. Or when
Yeah.
it comes to drinking in a pub, a lot of the time, their ID is not even checked because they're adults and they just go in without getting checked.
Or
So
it's looked at by the bartender and then just etc. It's not put into a system.
yeah, yeah. So it's actually not a very effective way of like not serving drunks. So I find it surprising that this commissioner would sort of look at what the Northern Territory are doing in that respect and hailing it to be some big success. It's not really. The dry zones that they had during the intervention era that have been extended, those have been a success. Um, but the banned drinker registry is like, yeah, is really really small. Um, okay, so still in Queensland, police will be allowed to search people for weapons without a warrant. And this was after the state government expanded the police's wanding powers. So those metal detectors
Yeah.
that they pass over you while you got your arms in the air and your legs stretched out. Um, oh god, Nolsey, did you watch? I can't help but think of that bloody show Adolescence. Have you watched it yet?
Oh yes, the one time they swapped a black character for a white one.
Yeah, he was apparently radicalized by Andrew Tate, so he stabbed a 13-year-old girl. That's what he
Yeah,
did.
it wasn't based off an incident or like two incidents where it was like a black dude in the UK or black boy in the UK literally doing the same thing, but for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I watched a Black Pigeon Speaks video on this, and he was pointing out that he's like, okay, yeah, there is knife crime among 13-year-old boys in Britain, but they're all black.
It's
And
like,
yeah, like
yeah.
you said, they just do it because they're black. There's no reason for it. They're just violent.
Well, the thing
Nothing to
is,
do with Andrew Tate
there's that
or
one clip
yourself,
going
Subsidising.
around where it's like a tactical blade, and these two British like journalists are like talking on some show in the UK, saying like, "Oh, it's a real shame that there's nothing like Zombie Hunter on this and etc." And I looked at it and was like, "Oh, why would Zombie Hunter being printed on a blade actually make a difference to its classification?" And it turns out that literally fucking Jamaican, which is the older migratory black population, migrant black population in the UK. Turns out like that's like some voodoo shit that like the gangs was like, oh, I'm a zombie hunter. I'm gonna go kill the zombies. Instead of ops, which I guess they're called these days. They were called zombies back in like the early aughts in 2010s because of
Right.
some Jamaican voodoo shit. And they were
Yeah.
complaining about this like 13-inch machete, and because they'll complain like, "Oh, it's completely legal because it doesn't have the
Don't
word
worry,
zombie
they're banned
hunter
now.
on it."
Don't worry, they're illegal in Victoria now, machetes.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So look, I mean, it's a very similar thing in Queensland. Like, yes, there is an increase in knife crime, but it's not to do with like an increase of people possessing knives. It's because we have a more diverse population in Queensland, and if you want to talk specifically, it's Pacific Islanders and Africans who are causing all of
Yep.
that knife crime.
I mean, I
So,
remember some shop in Queensland, and I saw one group of Polynesians open up another group of Polynesians, and I saw some fucking Polynesian kid bleed to death in like fucking a minute and a half.
yeah, I remember that. That was in the train
That was
station, wasn't it?
fucking horrific, or some shit, wherever the fuck it was. But
Yeah,
yeah, no,
I
like,
saw it.
boy, I love being exposed to this kind of shit.
Yeah. So the problem is not the knives; it's the people using the knives. But will we actually address that issue? Of course not. So we just have to give police expanded powers to wand us and search us and confiscate items from us.
Yeah, so it's like the
Not
thing was
come
like
to a police state.
again, it's like America doesn't have a gun problem, and it's just like you get that graph, and it shows like all these European countries, and it's America. It's like, okay, what are they correcting for? Oh, that's what they're correcting for.
Mm. America has a minority problem. They have a problem with blacks and Hispanics using guns.
I remember that one image, and it's just like the tip of the iceberg, and it says guns, and then it selects the N, capitalizes the N at the end, and the rest of the iceberg spells out something completely different going down. Uh, but yeah,
Okay.
that's
Now, here was just sort of an amusing story under the topic of crime that caught my eye. I didn't actually know this before, but when uh, police, sometimes they confiscate cars, often to do with someone, going to jail or having a number of driving offences or something. But sometimes when they confiscate those cars, they actually add them to the fleet of police cars. I didn't know that. I knew that they auction them, but I didn't know they actually literally refurbish them for themselves. I didn't know that. But here in WA, we now have a 2017 Maserati. Oh God, I don't know how to spell that, but anyway, it's a luxury sports car, and that is now part of the WA vehicle fleet. That is worth over $100,000. So that was seized back in January from someone who was a repeat traffic offender. I'm just
all
trying to
right.
picture
Repeat traffic offender. That is a.
who owns a car worth over $100,000 and he can't stop himself from speeding. Um,
I'm guessing BMW, like a high-end BMW.
it was no, it was a Maserati.
Oh, actually, there we go. That fucking explains it.
I don't know what type of person drives a Maserati though. I'm not a petrol head, so.
A dickhead.
But yeah, that's
No,
the
it's
the
Maserati is just like, oh yeah, they market themselves. Remember Locust back in the day saying like, oh, they're like, their power to rate ratio.
no.
No, okay, well, Maserati does that. They're like, oh yeah, they market speeders. They market to speeders. They market to people who because it's not a track car. It's a car very much set up for the roads, but also it's marketed as like a performance, like a high performance race car. So guess who buys those things?
Right.
It's not like you're buying Mercedes Roadster or like, I don't know, like a fucking Aventador or something like that. Or a fucking Maybach if you're really, really fucking rich. You're buying a relatively budget road setup, tires and powertrain set up like a roadster, but the rest of it is set up like a race car. So you're buying it to break. You're buying this thing to break the law.
Okay. Well, they've actually the car is now white and covered in police signage, of course, to
Oh
make it look like
yes,
a vehicle.
I thought I
But
recognized this case. Yeah, they confiscated these kids' cars.
yeah, so now this police car also has painted on the slogan, "This is what happens when we put our foot down." and
Oh
literally
god.
take your car and drive it around ourselves. How about that? I remember a day where every police vehicle was either a Ford Falcon or a Holden Commodore. That was it. Now that whenever you see the cars drive past, they're just of any kind of make. I find nowadays. Okay. Now, in the Northern Territory, we've spoken a bit about the shortage of police officers and how they've had to resort to private security guards to sort of fill that void. Well, there were three security guards who recently took on an Aboriginal man who was kicked out of some premises for being drunk and disorderly. They gave him a good kick, and like he fell forward onto the road. They then started punching his head, and then one of the security guards kicked him in the head.
If someone's down, you probably shouldn't. But then again, like I know drunk belligerent Aboriginals, they do just keep getting up. It's like
Yeah, we don't know.
the zombies from Romero's works. You have to destroy the brain.
Yeah, I suspect that he just kept trying to get back into the premises, whatever it was, probably just a tavern. Um, so yeah, I mean, we don't like the footage only shows what happened like when they dragged him away from the entrance. We don't know what happened before that. But yeah, generally speaking, if you've got a guy on the ground, you shouldn't kick him in the head. Um, but the thing is, though, like if you want to, they seem to want to blame this on resorting to private security. They'll also just blame it on general racism as well. But
As always.
but I mean, do they not see the irony there? The fact that the constant accusations of racism made against Northern Territory police, or just police generally, has actually resulted in fewer police on the beat because they quit their jobs or they retire early or whatever. And so then you have to fill that void with private security who are not as well trained as police and who are more likely to assault people. Um, See, sometimes security guards will feel compelled to do that because they can't arrest you and they don't have handcuffs and they don't carry a gun or anything. So, like, really all they have at their disposal is themselves. So they use their fists and their feet sometimes to get their way. And that, unfortunately, is going to be what happens when you have a shortage of police. Okay. So, oh my God, human rights lawyers and Aboriginal leaders have lodged a complaint to the United Nations to address Australia's discriminatory and punitive youth justice policies. Um, so, this complaint argued that federal and territory governments' tough on crime policies has led to persistent and escalating racial discrimination and human rights violations against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. Now, look, this is probably going to result in the United Nations, just basically issuing another decree saying that Australia is violating um, the human rights of Aboriginal people. But it won't actually say anything about why we are apparently punitive towards them. And we're only discriminatory to the extent that their crime is disproportionate.
The thing is, that can't be a thing. In these people's minds, that just can't be a thing. That can't exist.
And, courts in Australia, by the way, they are encouraged to take the cultural background of an individual into account. They can't just outright say, like, all Aboriginal people should get a lower sentence. But they can.
It's like, oh, we have to look at community impact. Desperate impact is, I believe, is the legal term.
Well, yeah, but they can say, look at it at an individual, and they say, oh, Well, because this person's Aboriginal, they've experienced generational trauma or some bollocks like that, and therefore they will give them a reduced sentence. That happens all the time.
Or have you heard in the UK that now similar logic is being used to increase the sentencing for white males?
Well, it doesn't surprise me, especially given the laws we were just discussing earlier in Victoria. So
Yeah.
that does not surprise me in the least. Um, so yeah, and this is like, I mean, here in WA, we've just had our Labor government returned for a third term, and even our Labor government has maintained what you call tough on crime approach. I would argue that it's still not tough enough, but nonetheless, Labor have actually stood firm on a lot of proposed changes, including the age of criminal responsibility. Uh, they want to throw more money all the time at Banksia Hill to build new facilities and have renovations and everything that will basically have no effect whatsoever. But on the other hand, they are keeping Unit 18 open at Casuarina Prison. At least for now, they're keeping it open because they don't have anywhere else to put them. Okay. Now, last week we mentioned that there was confusion over WA's new gun laws, which our government proudly states are the toughest gun laws in the country. So, if you're a gun owner, don't you worry. WA police are going to contact every fire owner in WA to advise them on what the new laws mean. So, owners of rapid release or push button firearms will be financially compensated if they hand over those weapons by the 14th of April. And a new buyback scheme has also been offered for other types of guns for 9 months from April 14 to January 14 of next year. So, yeah, they often do this. Like, if a particular gun that you own suddenly becomes illegal, you can actually just sell it to the government, who then destroys it. That's what Howard did back in 1996, or slightly after that, when we had the Port Arthur massacre.
What the fuck do they mean by that?
By push button firearms.
Push button, like fast release firearms?
I don't know. Again, not a petrol head, and I'm not into guns either, so I couldn't tell you. Anyway, let's move on to, well, I said drugs for this topic, but really I'm just talking about smoking. We've got more data coming in, and more small businesses saying that cigarette sales have dropped significantly, and this is a direct result of illegal tobacco booming in Australia. So they said that the decline is also indirectly impacting the sales of other products. And they're looking for more action from the government to address the issue. Okay, well, here's the action that the government should take: reduce the excise tax. That's really it. Unless you want to go like full balls to the wall against these illegal tobacco operations, and launch SWAT teams on them or something. They're not going away, and the government doesn't like this either, because they're no longer collecting the exorbitant excise tax that they had been for so long from the inflated price of cigarettes. So, yeah, small businesses are going to continue to hurt over this.
All right. Anyway, I'm looking forward to more Lebanese smoke shops being firebombed.
Yeah, you haven't seen the last.
Glory to Israel. There was two over here like a month ago.
Was that?
Yeah, I remember one of my coworkers, or ex-coworkers, fucking complaining about it.
Yeah.
He went to a place he was buying illegal tobacco, like honest God, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I came there after work yesterday, and it was firebombed."
Did he buy that at like a barber shop?
No, it was a tobacconist.
Okay, because I've just noticed a lot of the barber shops in Perth. They have these fucking huge labs with like on steroids, covered in tats, but they're there supposedly simply just to cut your hair. I mean, you see
Oh
places
yeah,
like that, you know that place is a front for something else. You know,
oh
I
yeah,
don't
oh
I
fucking
don't think one of
absolutely.
those guys that think, oh yeah, he's just a hairdresser
Oh
by
no,
trade.
I guarantee you, I will name one fucking hairdresser, and I've been to it once, and they fucked up my hair so bad. I don't know, maybe so good, so bad. I remember when like I walked around for a couple. I don't know if you saw me back in the day when I had that Hitler Youth haircut, the really high and tight Hitler Youth haircut.
I don't think so.
Okay, no, it was a little bit after my guest appearance on the show. Boss Cuts in Inaloo is 100 fucking percent a front. It is a whole bunch of fat but muscle fat Lebanese dudes who have no clue how to fucking cut hair. They literally give like it was like they've got like the wall of photographs. It's all the same haircut. They even use guides and etc. And they gave me the highest and tightest fucking like Richard Spencer looking fucking Hitler ass youth haircut I've had in my entire fucking life. And I'm normally a mop head.
Yeah, see, I years ago when I was working in a city, I went into one of those places. I literally just went to like the nearest hairdresser there was to where I worked, and yeah, I remember being like really struck by the size of this guy. You know, he was like fucking twice the size of me, like like nearly 6 foot. He had one of those classic rat's tails that the Lebs always have,
Oh,
and he was just like covered neck to toe in tattoos. And I was like, "You're gonna cut my hair, you?" like, but all I do is get my head shaved, so it was hard for him to fuck that up.
yes.
So I had I had no issue with that. But
I
yeah, I
don't think I've
definitely
seen you with all that much hair, man. I don't think I've seen you with more than like God, like 75% of an inch of hair.
it's got my hair is really thick and wiry, so I basically can't do anything with it. So I just cut it short. Like it's basically impossible to style my hair in any way considered stylish. So I just shave it off.
You need to go take me for a haircut sometime and just give me the buzz cut. I promise I don't look like a fucking alien when you cut me bald.
All right, so let's talk about some federal election news. So we'll probably start each week with some polls. So we have a new news poll that was conducted showing that Labor is on 52% to the coalition's 48. And apparently, uh, Anthony Albanese is more popular with female voters than Peter Dutton is. So, leading some to say that Peter Dutton has a woman problem. No, I don't think so. I did see some data recently that showed that Gen Z, who I guess are in their 20s, um, they lean left more so than Gen Y did or millennials did when they were the same age. But on top of that, Gen Z females are also even more left wing than previous generations. So I don't think it's an issue to do with Dutton as an individual. It's
Nah.
just sadly because liberalism is the secular religion of the left, uh, and women tend to be followers rather than leaders or rebels. They just kind of go with whatever the prevailing culture tells them to go with, and yeah, that just means not a lot of them would be voting coalition. Now, the ABC has been running a lot of articles about what particular segments of the Australian society or voter base are looking for in this election. And like the one example I brought up here was Chinese Australians. Um, and so they talk about, of course, you have to bring up the the electorate of Chisholm, which is an outer suburb of Melbourne, and is our most Chinese electorate in the country. And that's why Labor and the Coalition now have a tradition of just running Asian candidates in Chisholm. But yeah, look, what they're after isn't all that different from average voters. I mean, the number one issue for them was cost of living. But an interesting one was that they do care deeply about Australia's relationship with China. And yeah, they want closer relations with China. And I guess when it comes to things like the Port of Darwin, they don't like the hysteria over a Chinese company having a lease there. So they do still have foreign allegiances that affect the way they vote in an election. And, that may not be one of the most nefarious of the lot. But it's interesting to see the ABC admit, like, the groups have group interests, except for whites.
Or at least they're allowed to.
Australia is a collection of many, many segments, but the biggest segment of all is not worth listening to. Okay, now there was a shop in Wagga Wagga that displayed a number of public figures as Nazis. It dressed them in Nazi uniforms. So this included Peter Dutton, Gina Reinhardt, Clive Palmer, and even Michael McCormick. I don't know why they included Michael McCormick in this mix. He is the former leader of the National Party. He ended up getting rolled by Barnaby Joyce. Remember, he actually took over from Barnaby Joyce because Barnaby Joyce had an affair.
And, shat the marital bed.
Yeah, and then that was the beginning of the bonk ban that Malcolm Turnbull introduced, basically saying you weren't allowed to root your employees in Canberra.
Wasn't it Barnaby Joyce who also passed out on a park bench, drunk at it was filmed saying get fucked?
Yeah, he didn't pass out. What he did was probably even worse. He fell off a bench while he was shit faced, and then he continued to mutter on the phone and just lie there while someone.
What? I've been pretty fucking fucked, to be honest, in my life, but I don't think I've been a stone's throw away from that.
Yeah, Barnaby probably does have a few issues, considering.
God damn.
Anyway, this was obviously just some business owner who does not like the Liberals, and engages in some pretty hyperbolic political messaging. We've got a fucking horrendous business over here in WA called Rabble Books and Games, and they host Drag Queen Story Hour and all sorts of fucking pro tranny events and stuff. It's sickening. You are seeing a rise of these sort of socially conscious small businesses. All right. Now the Muslim vote and the Greens had what was basically a joint rally the other day that was known as an anti-racism rally. So this was against anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian hate, and it occurred in Western Sydney. So they actually marched to the offices of Jason Clare in Blacksland and Tony Burke in Watson. Because remember, these are actually two electorates that the Muslim vote is targeting. And in the places where the Muslim vote is not running one of their own, independent backed candidates, they're simply just endorsing Greens candidates instead. Now, I'm sure they would rather, one of their own, like an independent that is simply backed by them. Um, but in the absence of that, considering they're nowhere near as well funded as what the Teals are, they simply just throw their weight behind someone like Samantha Ratnam, who they recently endorsed for
Something
the
that's good
Victorian.
enough. Has good enough messaging. I mean, it's like
Right.
white conservatives. It's like a not the best, but someone with good enough messaging.
Yeah, but it is kind of funny that like this rally. I mean, I read this in the Australian. I didn't read it anywhere else, and it was a fairly small story. Had this been a march against anti-Semitism, it would have gotten a hell of a lot more coverage. Um, but this one didn't. Uh, so yeah, I mean, you're allowed to talk about the anti-Semitism crisis here, and to an extent, you're allowed to talk about the Islamophobic one, but there's a clear bias here. Okay, so oh yeah, so Climate 200. They've recently released an ad that attacks the coalition, and it's been criticised for uh, exploitation of children. So the format of the ad is where you have a number of young Australian school children who actually quote members of the coalition. Uh, and so it's all to do with
Oh no,
the
kids being what
yeah,
they think is slightly edgy. Wow, that's very novel.
yeah. So, for example, Matt Canavan said it's time we dumped net zero. So one of the kids reads out that quote. Another one was Alex Antic saying we should be drilling, baby, drilling. Okay, that both of those guys are considered to be mavericks of their respective parties, and they both sit on the back bench, and they basically cannot move to the front bench because of those differing views on net zero. That's the whole reason they're there. So it's a bit much to be quoting them. You know, they're basically just voices in the party that no one is ever going to listen to. Alex Antic may get a few people listening to his podcast that is called Based, but he's
Oh
not going to get
God.
lined up to listen to.
Listen to us. Listen to us. We're way better. We're actually based.
Yes. And now I don't want to use that term anymore, Like so many of these terms I did like using,
Apparently, it
I
came
don't
from
like them because
some.
they always end up getting appropriated by wankers.
Again, bass apparently came from black rap retard back in the day. So
Well, yeah, true. Okay,
because
now,
his work was called bass, like basic as in is like very simple and stupid and etc. And yeah, he was just like, oh yeah, I'm base god.
so the Liberal Party has dumped a New South Wales candidate in the seat of Whitlam, whose name is Benjamin Britten. Um, so this comes after it was revealed that he had previously made comments saying that women should not serve in the ADF. Or actually, no, more specifically, he said that women should not serve in combat roles. Okay, I mean, that's something we've said here many times before, and I consider that to be a very, very pro woman stance, because that's effectively saying, I don't want women to walk away with PTSD from the battlefield. What the hell is wrong with that? Okay. Uh, Psychologically speaking, and physically speaking, men are better equipped for the battlefield. I'd still
Yeah,
rather that they didn't have to do it either, considering the amount of problems that
if it's
Australia
if you're
veterans have.
gonna fucking do it fucking right. Send the dudes.
Right, and there's a multitude of other reasons why, like, you don't want women on the front lines either. Like, for example, uh, male soldiers are more likely to take bigger risks in the aid of a female soldier than they would a male soldier. In other words, they want to be more of a hero and save the injured female on the
But
battlefield.
also, like, Jesus Christ, you shoot center of mass. Okay, so you get like 1,000 dudes and you get 1,000 women. You shoot center of mass. Guess who survives more?
Right.
That's
Yes. I
that's
mean,
that's literally because there is a different fucking vascular system in both men and women for obvious fucking reasons. But yeah. That's the big thing. Like, oh, like how do you die in war? What's the most accurate way to die in a modern war? Post penicillin, is you get shot, you fucking fall down the field and you bleed out. That's how you die. If you look at footage from Ukraine, unfortunately, that's what you see. Some dude gets shrapnel to a very nasty place of him, and he bleeds the fuck out and dies. That happens a lot more with women and much more easier.
right. Well, let me read what this guy said. Um, he said that the ADF needs to remove females from combat corps in order to fix the military. Their hips are being destroyed because they can't cope with the carrying of the heavy loads and the heavy impact that's required for doing combat related jobs. Why would you want to send your beautiful women, your females, the ones that are the backbone of your society? Your society only exists because of women. Why would you want to sacrifice them in war on the altar? So you notice how he tries to be like as feminist as possible in what he's saying there,
Yeah.
but that still wasn't good enough. That has still cost him his pre-selection.
Look, if I was to like kind of appease both women and your conservative types, with this kind of argument, it's like, hey, look, women, we'll allow you in the military for, administrative positions, etc. Literally every single branch has like the desk admin that processes like literally pay, leave, and etc. Like literally that a good fucking 60% of the ADF is that right now. But hey, those combat roles and etc. Yeah, you're not fucking doing them, unfortunately. I don't fucking care. Every woman is a bleeder.
And also, he didn't say that they should be banned from serving in the military. He just said from combat roles.
Yeah, that I
And
mean
I think,
that's ideal, if really, because in all fairness, in peacetime, the military is a jobs program. It's a work furlough program, really.
yeah, a lot of people who don't really know what to do with their lives end up taking like an apprenticeship with the military, and it often serves them very well. And I have no problem with females doing that. Um,
I know that the police like the military quite a bit on average in most countries, but I'll say this: there's a big difference between the police and the military. The military doesn't require you to have a backup job, but the police normally want you to have something to fall back on.
yeah.
You can go into the military with nothing, baby.
Um, okay, so a couple of quick stories for you. So our government in WA, like I said, Labor's been re-elected for a third term. They have
Yep.
actually announced an independent review into just what the fuck happened at our last election. So this was after there was a shortage of staff and even ballot papers at some of the polling booths. So I'm glad this is just like a small review because initially they were actually talking about a royal commission, which is just ludicrous because I mean that costs multi millions and just results in a list of recommendations that no one ever implements. So I'm glad it's just a small review that they're doing here. Clive Palmer, uh, he was actually he was doing a lot of advertising again, as you would expect from him. I occasionally flick on Sky News, and there is always a bloody Palmer ad during the ad break on Sky News. Anyway, they're under fire for using a clip from a 20-year-old documentary. That's on. You can watch it on YouTube. I watched a little bit of it before, but what it was about was climate scientists researching the ice core in Greenland. And those who don't know, like ice cores sort of like contain data going back hundreds of thousands of years
Yeah.
that give you clues as to how warm or what the climate was like in the world like thousands of
Like what
years
kind of
ago.
just like okay, there's pockets of gases here. What's the concentration? Blah blah blah. Like okay, there's certain like types of like dissolved minerals. Okay, so what at what temperature do they like to dissolve at this concentration or this projected concentration? Da, 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 da.
Yeah. So the purpose of them running this ad was they took a segment from the documentary where like the chief scientist or whoever it is working on the project says that Greenland had actually experienced much warmer climates in decades past. So it's I guess you could say it's climate change denial material. I've heard claims like that before. The world has been hotter than what it was previously, despite the fact we weren't burning enormous amounts of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Um, but the actual that guy though, the scientist who's used in the documentary, he's not happy about it because he was never contacted about it, and he also says that much of what they said in that documentary is now like dated, um, and it's not reliable anymore. So I don't
Again,
know. I
like
don't know.
same with the scientists, well, the quote unquote scientists behind the hockey stick graph. Like the hockey stick graph was like, oh yeah, this is the actual institute that put it together was like, hey, look, this is a projection, but we're working on like a lot of speculations here. And then fucking Al Gore just went and showed it to the public. It was just like, and they were like, no, don't do that. Because I think both me and you would be underwater opinion if the hockey stick graph was actually true. 2025, no polarized caps at all.
Was that what they said by 2025?
Oh no, they said it earlier. They said by 2015. But yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to. Well, I mean, I know that in Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore said that like the Statue of Liberty would be submerged in water by now. That was one of the predictions. Do you remember that one?
yep. Well, I mean, I was very young at the time.
Yeah. God, geez, even I was when I watched that. I believe actually the reason I saw that is because it was put on for free at my university, so so I went along. Of course, our uni was glad to show a movie like that for free. Um, okay, now just one more thing on Clive Palmer. Apparently, he holds the secret to negotiating a tariff deal with Donald Trump. So he said that he has been told by confidants of Donald Trump just what he would want from Australia in exchange for dropping or reducing tariffs. And here it is: apologise. What Anthony Albanese needs to do is apologise for the comments he made about the president. You might think this is minor, but it's an important thing if you know Trump. Oh, right. That's so what? He holds grudges. He went on to talk about Kevin Rudd and the disparaging remarks Rudd has made about Trump. And remember, Kevin Rudd is the ambassador, our ambassador
Yeah,
to America. But no, I know that Trump has an ego, but I somehow doubt that like that alone would be motivating these tariffs on Australia. I mean, why did he have tariffs 17% tariffs on Israel then when they all fawn over Trump, or at least they all praise him, and they wanted to. Didn't they want to name a town in the Golan Heights after Trump as well?
yeah. Trump Heights.
Yeah, so I no, I don't know why Palmer says things like this. And I mean, this is definitely the election where Palmer has been trying hardest to look like Donald Trump. I mean, he's even named his party Trumpet of Patriots. That name itself is in honor of Donald Trump. And yet here he is telling us all that like what motivates Donald Trump is personal grudges. It's not a very flattering image, I don't think.
No. Uh, I was gonna say I still need to see. Like, I've heard some schizo rationales about like why these tariffs are being put in place and what their structure is. There was some person saying like, oh look, if the U.S. economy gets reduced to this amount, there's actually this contract that exists for like something like 80% of the U.S. debt where it can be refinanced at a different rate, and da 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 da. So that makes sense. Like, okay, like they refinance their debt, and then therefore like Trump could kick the debt ceiling um literally fucking 8 years into the future, the debt ceiling raising, because that's like a big thing in America.
Hmm.
um there's a whole bunch of like dumb political chess going on with this. I don't think that's the case.
No, no, same.
I really want a better explanation. I don't have one right now, but I'm looking for one.
Yeah. Okay, so here's just a little bit of cringe from the campaign trail. So the Teal Independent Nicolette Bowl has apologized for an inappropriate remark she made to a teenage worker, to a female hairdresser, I believe. So this was in the seat of Bradfield. She went into a salon and got like her hair done by some 19-year-old girl. And then at the end of it, she said, "Amazing, and I didn't even have to have sex with you." And she
Okay.
she then said this was a poor attempt at humor. Yeah, I think that's putting it mildly. That wasn't even remotely funny. And she did apologize. And she said, "Everyone deserves to feel respected in their workplace, and I'll do better." I'd say you just need to work on your comedy a bit more. If you're going to make a joke, actually make a funny one. That was just fucking lame.
Yeah, that's just obtuse.
Okay, now, one of the Teal independents, uh, backed, of course, by Simon Holmes Accord and Climate 200, has been caught having a meeting with a One Nation candidate. Um, so, this is Ben Smith, he's the independent. He had a meetup with Mike Brown. No, not that Mike Brown, but Mike Brown from One Nation. They apparently met at an Anglican church last Wednesday. Now, they're just saying that this must have been to do with discussing preferences, um, but this is not a good look for the Teals because apparently they don't do that. When it comes to their preferences, they do it simply as a matter of choosing who they think is best, and they don't do deals with other parties or other independents. Uh, like Labor do, like the coalition do. But no, I mean, I never believed that. And remember, the Teals aren't even real independents. They are a fairly well organised political party, all in but name. So it doesn't surprise me that they would act in a way like that.
Hmm.
Okay, now we know about the freeze on the use of puberty blockers in Queensland, or at least that freeze will be in place until the results of an inquiry are released. Uh, so now we have a mother of a trans teenager in
Oh
Queensland
fuck.
who is taking legal action against the Queensland Health Director General. So this woman is not named, and neither is her daughter, quote unquote. In other words, her son, who she wants to mutilate the genitals of. But yeah, they've obtained an order in the Supreme Court uh, to force Dr. David Rosengren to provide her with a statement of reasons for the freeze. Um, so Dr. Rosengren approved a health service directive which banned public doctors from providing puberty blockers and hormone treatment to any new gender dysphoria patients aged under 18. Um, yeah, so you see, the figures didn't even apply to people who were already in the system. It's just new people who are diagnosed with so-called gender dysphoria, and it only applies to people under the age of 18. And as we've covered here before, there's already been protests supposedly to protect trans teenagers or trans children.
I
Oh
remember
man,
seeing like this collage, and it's even this psychosis. I guess now there's been like a cultural pendulum swing. They've got like these mainstream, like multi-million at a time fucking viewer Twitch streamers saying like, "Hey, look, if you're a trans child, it means that one of your parents has a mental issue." And he's like, it's like I've never seen one that has a two-parent household unless those two parents are either gay or one of them is also of an identifying LGBT group.
yeah,
It's
or
like,
the mother is
find me
some kind
one.
of
Go
trans.
find me one. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at like the parents of those kids who are drag queens, like um, Lactatia and Desmond is Amazing. Have you seen their parents?
Oh yeah, they're freaks.
Like the Lactatia one, I remember his mum was this huge fat woman with like a bull ring in her nose, and it was covered in tats, and she had a T-shirt that had the swastika being thrown in a rubbish bin. You know that was his mum. It was like, okay, no wonder he fucking was raised like that. You know, the state should seize these children. They grow up in a what is clearly an abusive household, and these parents should be thrown in jail for engaging in child abuse. That's what would happen under my Reich, anyway.
Hmm.
Um, okay, now in South Australia, uh, the head of the Women's and Children's Hospital has apologised and ordered a review of the state's gender diversity service. And by the way, that means uh, the um, the giving of hormone treatment and puberty blockers. Essentially, they're talking about gender reassignment surgery. It's been revealed that the clinic did not refer almost 2 dozen children to a psychiatrist in line with government guidelines. So, what this means is those like the rules say that you can't get puberty blockers or hormone treatment or whatever until you have met the specific guidelines. And one of those says that you have to be assessed by a psychiatrist. Now, this is saying that many of these children were essentially fast tracked through that process and did not see the psychiatrist and just went in straight away to get the gender reassignment treatment. So uh, their mutilation and abuse was just fast tracked by the system. Isn't that amazing? Yet most of the controversy seems to be around Queensland actually just putting a freeze on these sick practices, whereas in South Australia they're just like streamlining it.
What the fuck is going on in South Australia?
Yeah, no, that is
We
that is
need to get a man on the ground in South Australia to get the pulse, get the temperature of what's going on. Get the smell in the air. Is it rotten or is it daisies?
okay. A couple of stories to round us out on education. The coalition has promised to crack down on woke ideology in both schools and universities. Now, this has like the student union and also many teachers worried. Uh, I would say to them, I don't think you have anything to be worried about because whenever Peter Dutton has been pressed on detail here, in other words, like would he, for example, change the national curricula, he doesn't give any details. And usually what that means is he doesn't have any intention of changing anything. So I would say, rest assured, even if you do get a Dutton government, I wouldn't worry about your woke ideologies being threatened,
Oh
even
no,
though
my
that's a good thing.
wokies.
So, I mean, the other story we have here is that Catholic schools around the country have called on the government to amend the national curriculum or to just abolish it, um, to get rid of all of this crap that we have in it. And one of the things that they're actually citing here is that girls at an increasing rate are outperforming boys academically at school. And this same data has even been found in Catholic schools. Now, remember, on average, males do have slightly higher intelligence than females. Okay? I'm not saying that to be
It's
offensive or
like
anything, but
males like a valley, females are like a fucking hill. But also the male valley equals out to
yeah, the
slightly
females
more
cluster
intelligent.
around the
Yeah.
midpoint much more. Is that what you mean? Like they're kind of closer to the mean. Like there's way more dumb males than there are dumb females. But by the same token, there's more male geniuses than there are female geniuses. Uh, Females cluster more around the mean because they've evolved to have an average intelligence that is required for the raising of children. That's my understanding of it anyway. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is that simply going by that measure, the fact that males are slightly more intelligent than females would therefore mean that you would have slightly better academic results for boys over girls in school, in university. But we know that in the past 2 decades, that's been changing. And the Catholic schools say that a big reason for that is because of how ideological we've made the classroom. Um, and that's very true. And,
Yeah, but being a dipshit gets you lower grades because you're a dipshit. Being overly inquisitive and at times edgy and provocative and antsy, yeah, that's not going to get you far in your modern day classroom.
no, it'll get you a script for Ritalin, but
Yeah, it will.
it won't get you very far.
You'll get a script for fucking Dex. It's not Ritalin anymore. It's dexamphetamines. They went straight from the basically the like Kaima with extra groups to just straight up meth with extra groups. It went from speed to meth, basically.
But yeah, all that stuff, when we have a feminized curricula, when we have just a feminized workforce as well, especially in primary schools, like there's basically no such thing as a male primary school teacher anymore. Yeah, this stuff is going to happen. And so, Peter Dutton, why? I don't get this. I mean, he says he wants to declare war on woke, but he never actually proposes anything concrete. He never gives any details as to how he would do that. I mean, Labor will tell you how they will change the curriculum to do things like indigenize education. They'll give you those details. The coalition won't give any details on how they would undo all of those measures. Now, well, here's another example. The coalition has said that they would retain sexual consent education in the national curriculum if they were elected. Okay, now remember, these sexual consent education this is not about like preventing rape. That's what we're told. We're always told that, like, if we just had a better understanding of gender roles and gender imbalances, and if boys just respected girls more or something, that that would lead to a decrease in sexual assault. Um, it's all
Not really.
bullshit, and everyone already understands consent. We already know that obviously to partake in a sexual act with another person, you need that person's consent. Everyone understands that. They don't need to be re educated on it. But, instead, what they do is they just, um, dare I say, they teach stuff to boys that makes them rebel and then listen to Andrew Tate later on. because they're sick of being told that they're an evil male.
Again, you
And
just take
that
more and
doesn't.
more things away from someone. Eventually, you've more or less made every pathway to the future look like shit. So they're like, oh god, there's no future. Might as well fucking throw away my present. Might as well
Yeah,
fucking just be an absolute shitbag. At least I'll be in
and
control then.
they need like those who have supported such programs through consent education and whatnot, and just the feminist movement generally. They need to actually own up to their own responsibility in creating the manosphere. Because, I mean, if you tell men for long enough how bad they are just because they're men, eventually you're going to get some kind of a reaction to it. And, I'd actually agree with them that, the manosphere to an extent is toxic. I mean, I hate the term toxic
Oh god.
masculinity. But like, for example, like part of the manosphere is that MGTOW, which basically says, like, give up, don't bother getting involved.
Literally the modern day MGTOW thing. I've actually done a little bit of fucking private research on this because some of it started to pop up on my feeds again. I was just like, okay, all right. So what are they up to these days? Their answer to everything is to literally go to some part of jungle Asia and get like some conservative woman there. I'm just like,
Mm. Yeah. So it
dude.
actively promotes race mixing. Yeah. Yeah, because they point out that, like, the worst form of female is, like, the modern day woke Westerner, Western female. And, all right, they might have a point there because, yeah, their minds have been polluted to a large extent. But why the fuck should that mean that you then go and miscegenate and destroy your
I
bloodline?
think the worst part is that this is genuinely popular. There's like channels like The Wall, Shack, so that's a Sierra Hotel Alpha Kilo, and Griffin's Mind. That's like Griff as in like Golf, Romeo, India, Foxtrot, Foxtrot, India, November. Those channels, they're MGTOW channels, and all they do, they're very popular. All they do is literally just like look at drama TikToks and then be like, "Hey man, you need to go where you're worth more. Like if these bitches don't think you're worth shit over here, you need to go where you're worth more."
Hmm.
It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. But I mean, feminists need to actually acknowledge that they helped create that.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, there's some again they go through a whole bunch of TikToks. I like some of them because they actually go through like, okay, so here's like the women's perspective on this new phenomena with men, or like, and basically it's like a slideshow of like women reacting to the downfall of their own society. They just become more like dejected and etc. And then obviously more politically radical in some ways as well, as we've seen, I guess. As we previously
Well,
talked
I
about.
mean, we were just talking before about how Gen Z females are much more left leaning than previous generations.
Yeah, no, and literally, it's there was one TikTok where a girl brought up like she bought like a copy of the Little Red Book and was using like old school Marxist language to explain why passport bros are like fucking white dudes really who go over there with like like a month's worth of salary from their job in the West, and they go over to some part of East Asia and live like a fucking king because of purchasing power. And I literally saw this early 20 something woman explaining in like 1920s, 1930s Marxist language why that was like an exploitative proletariat and why there should be a revolution in those countries against, these oppressive white men who bring in money.
Yeah.
And I was astounded. I was like, okay, this is a piece of political discourse I didn't expect to find on literally like slop internet, but okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I hope that that like 13-year-old in adolescence, I would hope that a kid like him would find a podcast like ours instead, you know, uh, and doesn't have to resort to the manosphere to form his worldview. Um,
Yeah.
like, sure, yeah, like some people definitely would be pointing at him and saying he's bad because he's a man, or at least he has something to atone for because he's male. But that doesn't mean you have to listen to Andrew Tate or whatever, and certainly doesn't mean you need to stab a girl. But also, the idea that Andrew Tate is like leading these kids to go and like stab their
Yeah,
classmates
no.
is just fucking bullshit.
Andrew Tate is leading his like cohort to become like vicious mercantile bastards and possibly whoremongers. That's about it.
Yeah, and he's a piece of shit. I mean, he's clearly like basically
He's a piece of
doing like
shit.
a mild form of sex slavery in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Um, which, yeah, I'm not going to defend for a second.
Is it the MGTOW thing like, oh, women won't take responsibility for X, Y, and Z? And it's like, well, yeah, because women, and this is something you have to be honest about, they don't have like a level of agency. Like, if they're to be left on their own, etc., like there would be their first instinct would be to go find someone to fix their problem. Where like a guy, it's just like, okay, well, I need to fix this problem.
Yeah.
Like we have to understand that the MGTOWs like say like, oh God, they're forever children. It's like, no, that's not really the case. It's just because something is available to one sex, it's just not available to the other. That's how that works.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, I could carry on about that for ages, but we really should get to him.
We're getting damn near close to 3 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I will go through the remaining stories quickly. So in Victoria, they are banning having logos on school clothing that is from the waist down. Now, the reason why is because many of the brands that you can buy that make up the school uniform can be expensive. And I certainly remember, like, when I was in primary school, that was a big status thing. If you're, like, say, if your bag was from a high end brand or something, and the kid who had a cheap one would get bullied. That's basically what they're getting at here, because a lot of the kids feel like they're pressured to have like a big name brand. So they're banning that, but they're not banning anything above the waist. So you can still
I'd
wear a
go
jacket.
full Jap mode on this. Like I saw Japanese uniforms and etc. while I was over there, and outside of like different coloring and maybe like a crescent on some parts of it, like literally their backpacks are all the fucking same. Their fucking shirts, pants, skirt, blouse/blazer. They're all the same across all fucking schools. I'd go with that.
Not to mention the Japanese people already all look the same anyway.
Yeah, that too, but
making it worse.
If you look hard enough, you can tell the difference. You have to get the angle, the angle of the light in the room right. But no, I think the Japanese method of doing this, like everything is the same except for maybe some mild school branding or school colors, but everything is just ubiquitous. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, so last story with education. Nearly half of the Australian universities with Chinese-linked Confucius institutes have cut ties with those education centres.
Wonder why.
Yeah, so I mean, these Confucius institutes, basically their job was to spread Chinese propaganda throughout Australian universities, which, yes, is what you would call blatant foreign interference. So, okay, definitely not the worst form of foreign interference that we experienced in Australia, but nonetheless, if they're shutting down, that's a good thing. On health, so Albo has announced $150 million to a new $300 million Flinders University healthcare centre, and the coalition announced it will match it. Not a surprise there. That'll be in construction in 2027. So another like bargaining point of the Greens, in the event that you had a Labor minority government, the Greens want to have a multi-billion-dollar program, $46 billion, in fact, to introduce universal dental care. So first of all, that 46 billion, that is done by the Greens' own economic modelling, which I don't think is very trustworthy. But Labor has said, in terms of their own commitment, that they do actually support dental care eventually just being completely subsumed by Medicare. However, they say that that's a long-term target. The Greens basically want the government to snap their fingers and make it pop up overnight. This is another example of just how utopian the Greens are, where they just seem to actually live in a fucking fantasy world where they think things like that can just spring up overnight. And of course, they'll never take into account the free rider problem. I mean, how much would that cost in Aboriginal communities? Can you imagine providing free dental care to all of those people, like basically living off the grid in rural Australia? How much of a fucking nightmare that would be. Okay. So on infrastructure, the South Metro began testing the new line connecting, what is that, Sydenham to Bankstown. So it took a slow 5-hour trip, but it's getting there. It'll soon be fully operational. Now, something quite disturbing actually came from Sydney's Metro the other day. This is on film, and multiple people went and filmed this. But a train took off with the door wide open, fully open. It reminds me of that plane, like where the escape hatch opened a few months ago. That would be a pretty scary thing to see, especially with a train moving at high speeds.
Yeah, dude, fucking you can see the fucking Venturi effect happening where people's hair is getting sucked towards the door. There was this one woman holding onto the thing and her hair is literally going towards the open door. But it's just accommodating a new multicultural population. Some Indians like to squat out the side of their open trains and shit.
Yeah, or Afghans holding onto a fuselage on a departing plane.
Yeah, that too,
Oh God. So yeah, well, I don't know. Is that a sign of things to come? Of third world infrastructure here in Australia? Could be. All right, just quickly on national security. We already kind of went through this, but the Port of Darwin, that is currently leased to a Chinese company that is also, linked to the government, because basically all large Chinese corporations are these sort of public-private partnerships. Peter Dutton says that if he was elected, he would immediately cancel that lease with them and actually use the Commonwealth's acquisition powers in order to make that happen. So he would make it that lease would be in Australian hands. Anthony Albanese, on the other hand, has said that he has planned to take it back into Australian hands, but that has simply been delayed because he has actually been promising that for some time, and we're not actually seeing any action on it. So, yeah, I guess I would support extreme measures being taken if that means we have our ports actually operated by Australians, by Australian companies. That would be nice. Anyway, that's where
just nationalize it. Anyway,
bit of a longer episode, but I mean we are in campaign mode, of course. So definitely a lot of news to go around.
We're on campaign mode, and this is only mission 3 of a 12-mission campaign.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The election is still a month away, so there is a bit to go. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening. As always, check out our stuff over at theracer.biz, and if you're feeling generous, theracer.biz/donate. And yeah, we'll see you next week. See ya.